Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. The engine cut out as I turned onto Old Mill Road, the headlights fading into a tunnel of pines so dense it swallowed the world whole. My breath caught, cold air filling the patrol car's cabin like a warning. I'd run that beat every night for 10 years, but this stretch always felt different. Abandoned farmhouses half hidden in undergrowth, rusted tractors buried in tall grass, the wind stirring the broken windows so they whispered like restless spirits. Dispatch had labeled this as a routine alarm at the Cartwright estate. Motion sensor tripped. Probably wildlife. Probably a deer bounding through the yard. But when the call came in, I'd felt that familiar tug in my gut. Stay sharp. I killed the engine and stepped onto gravel that crunched under my boots. My flashlight sliced through the darkness, revealing the mansion ahead. 2 stories of peeling paint and sagging roof lines. Its grandeur long since surrendered to rot. A wrought iron gate hung open, swinging on one hinge, and I could almost taste the damp tang of decay. I clipped my radio to my vest, static and my own ragged breathing, but no sign of Cruz, my usual partner. Shift change, mixing up the schedule again. I radioed in, voice low. Unit 17 here, investigating alarm at Cartwright. No visual so far. Silence, then dispatch. Copy, Unit 17, backup ETA 8 minutes. 7 felt like 70. I pushed through the gate, flashlight beam dancing over stone steps stained with moss. Every echo, my footfalls, the click of the flashlight's wheel, bounced back so crisply I half expected someone to answer. Nothing but emptiness. Inside, the air was thick, like breathing through a wet blanket. My light fell on a grand foyer, marble tiles cracked. Dust coats the once gleaming banister, and portraits glare down from the walls. Cartwright ancestors in stiff collars, their painted eyes following me. I swallowed, chest tight. Just an old house, I muttered. Hallways branched off like veins, each one darker than the last. I kept my taser holstered but thumb resting on the switch, a cold reassurance against whatever might lurk. The map on the call sheet placed the alarm in the east wing, where the windows were boarded and the roof sagged like a sunken grave. I moved toward it, passing rooms that used to be living spaces, a shattered chandelier, a sofa stuffed with straw, a fireplace still cradling ashes long cold. At the base of a grand staircase, I paused. My radio crackled, static, then a faint hiss like a distant whisper. I froze, heart thudding. "Cruz?" I whispered into the mic. Nothing but static. I flicked it off and in that sudden hush heard a soft click above me, like a door unlatching. I swept my light upward. The balusters stretched into shadow, each step swallowed by darkness. No sign of movement. I climbed the stairs slowly, beam trembling. The second floor smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. Doors lined the hallway, some ajar, others sealed with boards. My light paused on one door, pristine wood in the midst of ruin, the only door unblemished. My reflection shimmered in its brass knob, pale, tired eyes staring back. I reached out, fingers brushing the metal, and almost recoiled at the cold solidity, a contrast to the broken world around me. Inside, a long corridor stretched into inky blackness. I swept my light left and right, Frames hung crooked, their pictures ripped out, leaving gaping rectangles. A single chair sat beneath a broken window, tattered curtains hanging like skeletal hands. I stepped forward, boots echoing, and the door slammed shut behind me. My breath caught. I spun, flashlight beam stabbing the wood. No wind, no draft. The hinges sighed. I yanked at the knob, locked. My pulse raced. "Dispatch, I'm locked in the East Wing corridor. Send someone now." I hit the mic. Static. Nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then, from down the hall, a soft thunk. Something heavy moving. I flicked my light toward the sound, but the beam danced over empty space. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged in the beam. I edged forward, hand on the wall, tracing cracked plaster. Under my glove, I felt a smear of something. Damp, sticky. My light caught it. A handprint, small, like a child's, pressed into the dust. I stared, mind spinning. I raised the light higher. More prints, leading deeper, toward a blackened doorway at the corridor's end. I swallowed, every instinct screaming to retreat, but my feet moved on their own. Beyond the door was the nursery wing. Deserted cribs lined in rows, their paint chipped, springs hanging loose. The air tasted metallic. I swept my light across the floor. Round toys scattered. A rattle spun half-buried in dust. And there, in the center, a single doll, its porcelain face cracked, one ebony eye missing. I knelt, heart hammering, and something whispered behind me so close I felt the breath. "Go back." I snapped upright, spinning, weapon unholstered, but empty hallways stared back. My hand shook as I raised the taser's beam. It skittered over every angle. No shape, no shadow. Only that lingering echo. "Go back." My training snapped in. I holstered the taser, steadied my breathing. Protocol demanded I document, call backup, secure the perimeter. But every radio attempt brought only static. The house seemed to pulse around me. Wooden floorboards creaking under invisible weight. I backed toward the door, only to find the corridor stretched further, folding in on itself, the exit lost in an impossible maze of walls. Panic flickered, but I swallowed it. I scanned the doll again. Its remaining eye stared through me, unblinking. I bent to pick it up, and the nursery door slammed behind me so hard the walls rattled. I jumped, flashlight tilting to the floor. The doll clattered against the wood, its head rolled toward me, stopping at my boot. I froze, breath ragged, instincts screaming. I swooped down, grabbed the doll, and bolted for the nursery door. Flinging it open, I raced down the corridor, footsteps echoing behind me, faster than my own. When I reached the corridor junction, I turned, spotlight smashing the darkness. Nothing. Just silent walls and a single, low groan reverberating like a child's cry. I charged for the staircase, the way I'd come, praying it led up, praying it led out. The steps were steep, my boots skidding on the warped wood. I pounded upward, taser drawn, light bouncing erratically. At the top, I stumbled through a doorway into a grand hall. My breath came in jagged bursts. I slammed the doll into my coat pocket, its weight grounding me. Ahead, French doors led to a balcony. Moonlight spilled through broken panes, illuminating the courtyard beyond. I lunged forward and threw open the doors, cold air whipping in. I didn't look back as I jumped onto the balcony ledge, shoving through the broken railing. I hit the ground in a roll, grit scraping my face, and scrambled to my feet. Behind me, the mansion's front windows flickered, shadows racing behind the glass. I sprinted across the yard, heart hammering, feet churning through mud. The gate swung shut behind me with a final, violent clang. I yanked it open and sprinted to my cruiser. I fumbled the doll out of my pocket, half buried in dust, its cracked face grinning up at me. I tossed it onto the passenger seat and slammed the door. The engine roared to life on the first turn of the key, headlights stabbing at the darkness as I peeled away, tires clawing at gravel. In my mirror, the Cartwright mansion receded into blackness. Its windows like bereft eyes, its halls echoing with something that knew my name. I punched the mic. Dispatch. Unit 17 is en route back. Do not send anyone else inside. Static hissed back. Copy that, Unit 17. We're patching through the console logs. Last transmission was your call. I exhaled, shoulders sagging. Ahead, Old Mill Road stretched into shadow, an empty ribbon beneath the moon. My heart thundered as I gripped the wheel. I didn't speak until I was 20 miles away, until the mansion was a rumor in the trees. Then I whispered, "They'll never believe this." And I knew I'd be back, because something in that house called to me, something that wouldn't let me forget. The road home blurred past in a wash of headlights and radio static, my knuckles white on the wheel. I didn't dare glance back at the Cartwright place. Didn't want even one fragment of that nightmare sneaking into my rear view. 8 minutes turned into 20, and by the time I flagged down a uniform at the station, my voice was a croak. I need to file an incident report. Property alarm, no wildlife, possible break-in, but it's not what it seems. They looked at me funny, exchanging glances over the console. I slapped the doll on the paperwork, its cracked smile staring up at them. Found this on the scene. One detective picked it up, flipped it in his hand. "You sure this wasn't planted?" His tone had that edge. Either you're losing it, or you're covering something up. I shook my head. "You don't understand. It led me through that house." I leaned forward, voice low. Not just through rooms, through memories, through static. It showed me things, whispered my name. They exchanged looks again. I grabbed my notes, names, times, the corridors that shifted, the handprints in dust, the lullaby that drifted from the east wing. Details no deer or raccoon could produce. By midnight, they'd agreed. I'd come back with a team, SWAT, K-9s, engineers to check the wiring, and we'd sweep the Cartwright estate. But they insisted on a sane explanation. Trigger happy alarm, maybe a squatter. Nothing supernatural. I nodded, though every fiber of me begged otherwise. At 2 a.m., the team assembled at the gate. 2 patrol cars, a K-9 unit, and 2 uniformed deputies. I watched them load gear under yellow floodlights, the mansion's silhouette looming behind. Dispatch patched through. "Watch your comms. Keep it on channel 2. I clicked my radio to the backup channel. Static again. Someone muttered about radio dead zones. The Cart property always had poor reception. I frowned. That static wasn't a zone. It was a voice. We advanced in formation, K-9 lead, me guiding the way. My flashlight probed the gate's entrance. Its swing still hung loose. Beyond it, the overgrown driveway stretched like a buried spine. The deputies flanked me. I briefed them in clipped tones. East wing. Signal lost. Potential unknown subject. Stay together. We breached the front doors with a battering ram, light splintering like thunder. I half expected dust motes to swirl into ghostly shapes, but instead a dull hush greeted us. Our boots crunched over broken tiles. Flashlights flicked across the decaying grandeur. We moved as a unit, rifles raised. In the foyer, one deputy hissed, "No sign of life." Sounded like a bad alarm. I kept eyes forward, but the hall seemed longer, swallowing our beams. At the base of the grand staircase, a soft whisper rippled through the static on our radios. "Don't come." My heart thundered. I fingered my earpiece. The radio clipped out. One deputy glared at me. "What the hell was that?" I swallowed. Stay on point. We push east." K9 handler set the dog free. It sniffed ahead, tail low. We followed until we reached the nursery corridor, the boards torn off, prints still faint in the dust. The deputies paused, uneasy. I nodded them forward. The dog hesitated, hackles raised, ears flat. Its growl was low, primal. On the floor lay the doll, missing the eye. I knelt, chest tightening, and the dog whined. "Find anything?" the handler asked. I pointed. "This." He picked it up gingerly, dust motes puffing out. "Little creepy." I forced a smile. "Let's keep moving." Above us, a door slammed. The dog yelped and bolted, straight into a dark side hall. I raced after it. Deputies followed, rifles trained on the yawning shadows. We entered the side hall, an older corridor, beams sagging overhead. The dog was gone. I called its name, nothing but hollow echoes. My radio fizzed. "Dispatch, signal's dead. We're inside North Wing corridor, no dog." The funk of static soaked my eardrums. One deputy muttered, "This place is messing with us." I swallowed and pressed on. At the corridor's end, a barricaded door blocked our way. Boards wedged tight. The handler jammed them aside. Each splintered crack was like a scream. We moved in, lights blinding the gloom. Inside, the control room sat unchanged. Banks of dead monitors and one flickering screen. The static face appeared, swirling in the haze. A pale mask, mouth open, no eyes. I reached for the dog. It was crouched at my feet, trembling, fur matted. Then the corridor behind us buzzed, like 1,000 whispers converging. The deputies raised rifles, jaws tight. I pressed my back to the console, taser out. "Whispering," I said under my breath. Voices in the walls. The whispers etched through our comms, spinning words we couldn't fully grasp. One deputy shouted, "Evacuate! Something's not right!" But my boots were glued to the floor. I needed to know why. The flickering monitor died, plunging us into near pitch. Then the whisper, "Leave, or stay forever." My flashlight slipped in my hand, beam dancing. I pinned it on the far wall, where scrawled in fresh charcoal were words, my name, unit number, date. They were waiting. I felt a cold exhale behind me. I spun, rifle up, but nothing. The handler yanked at my arm. "We have to go." I hesitated, eyes glued to the writing. The words bled down the plaster as though etched by wet fingers. "You're ours now." I tore my gaze away. "Go!" I screamed. We tumbled out, slamming the door. Boards fell, wood splintered. The corridor collapsed into darkness. We bolted down the main hall, boots pounding, lights bouncing. Somewhere behind us, a cacophony of scratches rang out, thousands of nails on wood. Deputies shouted, voices cracking over the static. Out of the foyer, we spilled onto the porch. Deputies fanned out, rifles raised. Beyond the pillars, the night lay silent. Then the front door slammed shut from inside. My stomach dropped. The deputies froze, rifles trembling. I ran forward, yanking at the doors. They wouldn't budge. My flashlight beam caught movement in the window. A crouched shape, long arms, head tilting like a curious child. I slammed my shoulder into the wood. It creaked, but held. The shape pressed a pale face against the glass, its eyes black voids. I staggered back, heart in my throat. "Get back!" I shouted. The deputies stumbled away as the door rattled one final time, then went still. The shape vanished. Through the radio crackle, I heard dispatch. "Unit 17? You copy?" My voice returned thick and gravelly. "We're out. Evac the perimeter. No one else goes in." The static buzzed, a hollow, mocking laugh. I watched the squad cars pull out, lights flashing until they disappeared down Old Mill Road. I retrieved the doll from the handler's pocket. its eyeless gaze boring into me. I snapped it in two, tossing the head into the dirt. It landed, face up. The cracked smile seemed to widen. I climbed into my cruiser, locking the door. My radio sputtered back to life on Channel 1, dispatch chattering about reports and notifications. I clicked off the mic. The engine roared as I backed out. Back to civilization, safety, explanation. But as I drove, the image of that window shade face haunted me. The tilt of its head, the darkness of its eyes. And every time the radio hissed, just a breath of static, I heard a whisper, "Stay forever." Behind me, the Cartwright estate retreated into the night, but I knew that place had already claimed something of me. And until I faced what walked those halls, the static would never leave my ears, and the darkness would never let me go. The cruiser's taillights vanished behind me, swallowed by the curve of Old Mill Road. My hands shook so badly I nearly lost grip on the wheel. Ahead, the highway lights flickered. Mundane, reassuringly ordinary. But the Cartwright estate's horrors clung to me like an afterimage. The echo of scratching, the doll's fractured grin. I forced my eyes back to the road and slowed to a crawl as I approached my apartment complex. Inside, I locked every door and window, drew the blinds, and sat in the dark, heart pounding. By the time I punched in my door code and dropped the key on the side table, it was nearly dawn. I showered, hot water sluicing away sweat and grime, but the lather did nothing to scrub the cold dread from my skin. Steam fogged the mirror as I stared at my reflection. Hollow cheeks, dark circles, eyes wild. I pressed my palm flat against the glass, remembering the doll's single eye. The way its smile looked almost triumphant. I'd collected evidence, sworn statements. Backup had seen the writing on the wall, literally. They'd roll it into paperwork, find some logical cause, dismiss it as pranksters or old wiring. But I knew what lived in that house. I made coffee, black, bitter, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. Every detail, times, footprints, whispers, monitor face. I scribbled until the pages blurred, my mind replaying the team's retreat, that pale shape at the window. I underlined, "We must return." I knew I'd be compelled to go back, even if it killed me, because the Cartwright place had my name, and until I answered why, I wouldn't find peace. I'd requested the blueprints through official channels. By noon, they sat on my desk, yellowing plans showing the estate's layout, corridors I'd never visited, rooms sealed off decades ago, a maintenance wing, a servant's wing, a central control room tucked beneath the east wing, where the monitors had been. According to these plans, the east wing corridor where we'd been trapped was supposed to be a dead end. No doorway, no nursery. Yet the maps match the blueprints exactly, save for one glaring addendum scrawled in red ink by an unknown hand. An arrow pointing to a hidden passage between the ballroom and the nursery, marked "Do Not Enter." I traced the arrow with my finger, heart hammering. My desk phone rang. A dispatch call about a routine burglary downtown. I muttered excuses and hung up. Nothing else mattered. I copied the blueprints, slipped them into a folder labeled Cartwright Investigation, and headed to the precinct to borrow a forensic kit. Dusting powder, fingerprint tape, cameras, standard evidence-gathering tools. My badge granted me after-hours access to the evidence lockers. No questions asked. By 2000 hours I was back in the field, this time alone and unarmed, save for my flashlight and recorder. I parked half a mile down, out of sight. Moonlight was thin behind clouds. I approached on foot, heart thudding, senses taut. No deputies followed, no K9 barked, just me and the ragged hush of night. I slipped through the gate, careful to leave no trace. The mansion's facade rose against the sky, windows like dark portals. I found the ballroom entrance, ornate double doors still hanging loosely. Inside, moonlight filtered through a cracked skylight, dust motes floating in silent currents. The marble floor was pitted, water stains splashed across the walls. But what caught my eye was the baseboard toward the north end, where a seam ran almost invisible in the gloom, exactly where the arrow on the blueprints had indicated. I pressed my flashlight against it, a thin line of shadow. My gloved hand slid over it and found a small latch carved into the molding. I swallowed and pulled. The wall swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow passage illuminated by a single bare bulb overhead, one flickering, buzzing like a dying insect. The air that rushed out smelled of damp stone and something tangibly old, like a crypt. I clicked my recorder on. Officer Lewis, unofficial entry. Cartwright hidden passage discovered at ballroom north wall. Proceeding. My voice cracked. I swallowed and stepped inside, sealing the panel behind me. The corridor beyond was low-ceilinged, bare stone walls slick with moisture. My flashlight beam danced over ancient pipes and wiring. In the center, footprints in dust. Adult-size but elongated, toe marks splayed wide. They ran deeper into the tunnel. I followed, boots echoing. The corridor curved left, then right. Maps hadn't indicated this area. Ahead, a door of rusted iron barred the way, its surface pitted, a single slot cut at eye level like a peephole. I crouched, peered through the slot. Darkness. Nothing but the faintest glimmer at the far end. I risked a hand through the slot and felt cool metal bars, wavy as if forged by hand. I checked my phone, no signal. Good. This had to stay secret. I tapped on the bars. They vibrated, resonating deep in my chest. A low rumble answered, something shifting beyond. I straightened, heart hammering. I pressed my ear to the bars, distant whispers, scrambled, words I couldn't parse. Then a single phrase echoed clear enough to freeze my blood. "Welcome home." I staggered back, breath rasping. "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. And then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching from the other side of the iron door. I didn't dare shine my light through the slot. I'd seen enough faces in static. Instead, I backed up until my shoulder hit the opposite wall, heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it outside. The footsteps halted. I could feel the weight of presence, close, waiting. The whispers resumed, a susurrus in my skull. "Remember me," a voice hissed. Low, intimate, a woman's tone but warped, as if underwater. "I've missed you." I shook my head, mind racing. Memories flickered, of a child's laughter drifting down a corridor, of a mother's lullaby clashing with static. I thought of the doll, the tiny prince. The Cartwright family had perished here generations ago. Stories said the matriarch locked her child away after the boy vanished. They searched forever, never found him. Some claimed he took to the tunnels beneath, that his spirit wandered the halls. I swallowed, pressing my back against the damp stone. The door rattled. I flung myself at it, slamming my shoulder into the bars. The rusted metal groaned but held. I kicked at the door, once, twice, but the footfall shifted away, fading. I stood panting, chest heaving. My flashlight beam danced over the old stone, focusing on a rusty chain looped through the bars. No lock, just rust. Whoever, or whatever, had barred this door from the outside. I pulled the chain. It uncoiled with a scrape. The door swung open a crack, revealing a deeper chamber. Inside, the beam picked out a child's bed frame, half collapsed, and scribbles on the far wall. "Play with me." In front of it, the doll's missing eye lay on the floor, gleaming white under the bulb. My breath froze. I stepped inside. The prison door swung shut behind me with a clang that echoed like gunfire. I lunged to hold it, but the chain slipped free and clattered to the ground outside. In the glare of my flashlight, the chamber's walls closed in. Bare stone, graffiti carved in letters, names and dates spanning a century, like wards leaving marks for the next soul trapped here. A low hum filled the space, static from an unseen speaker. I traced the sound to a rusted metal box in the corner, wires leading into the walls. I pressed my ear to it, the same static faces whisper, "Stay, and never leave." My recorder slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Panic surged. This place was a trap. I raced to the door, yanking at the latch. It wouldn't budge. The static intensified, buzzing through the stone. I turned, light scanning the chamber, lunging at shadows, expecting something to come alive. Silence, then a soft laugh, childlike, mournful. I dropped to my knees, shaking. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know." The laugh grew louder, closer, echoing in my skull. The doll's eye rolled toward me across the floor, coming to rest at my boot. I recoiled, backing into the wall, shoulder pressed against cold stone, light shaking down the corridor I'd come through. The static box clicked off. Silence. Then the whispers again. Repeated names, including mine, etched into the stone. My pants were dust-covered, my coat soaked with moisture. I exhaled. "I have to get out," I said. I rose, shaking, and squared my shoulders. I pressed my shoulder against the door, buried all my weight into it. Wood and metal groaned. The bars ripped free, swinging open. I fell through, scraping hands and knees, and scrambled down the corridor, following the footprints back. Behind me, whispered laughter became screams, childish, angry. I ran without glance, bursting into the ballroom, rain beginning to patter through the cracked skylight. I crossed the marble floor and ripped the hidden panel closed behind me, sealing it once more. The latch clicked. It was done. I staggered outside into the night air, lungs burning. I didn't stop until I reached my cruiser down the driveway. I tossed the recorder in the passenger seat, its batteries dead, the last traces of static gone. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and stared at the mansion's windows, where the ballroom skylight glowed faintly as the clouds parted for a sliver of moon. I pressed the key in the ignition. Nothing. The battery was dead. I slammed my fist on the steering column. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper through the glass. I froze, breath caught. The passenger window rattled and cracked inward from the center, spiderwebbing outward, until the entire pane shattered. Glass rained onto the seat. I dove across the console, away from the window, and scrambled out the driver's door into the rain. I didn't look back. I ran for the gate, rain pelting my face, adrenaline burning. I reached the gate, but it slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a verdict. I yanked it open and tore across the yard, boots slipping in mud. The mansion's lights went dark, one by one, like dying embers. I leapt into the cruiser, hands trembling on the dripping metal. I slammed the door, slid across the seat to the driver's side, and kicked the door shut. I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I peeled away, tires spraying mud into the night. As the Cartwright estate receded, the ballroom skylight's glow vanished in my rearview mirror. But I knew it wasn't over, because somewhere beneath that rotting floor, something waited, hungry for company, and it had my name carved on its walls. I drove into the rain-soaked horizon, recorder in hand, whispering into the dead mic, "I'll be back." And from the static that crackled through the speaker, I heard one final whisper, "We'll be waiting." I peeled onto the highway before dawn, rain streaking the windshield in frantic rivulets. My chest burned from the sprint, but the real ache was in my mind, every sense still taut, every nerve raw. I didn't dare go home. The walls whispered there too. Instead, I drove until the sky bled gray and found myself at a 24-hour diner off Route 9. I slid into a booth, soaked coat dripping onto the vinyl seat, and ordered black coffee and eggs. Food tasted like ash. My hands trembled as I slid the recorder and blueprints onto the table. I pushed the play button, nothing but static. I tapped it again, static, then a faint murmur. "We'll be waiting." I stared at the wisp of sound, then at the splintered doll's eye I'd slipped into my pocket. Dawn light sliced through the diner window. The waitress slid a cup before me. "Long night, officer?" she asked, tone polite but strained. I nodded, eyes hollow. "Just paperwork," I said, voice brittle. When she left, I studied the blueprints again, tracing the red arrow toward the sealed control room beneath the east wing. "We must return," I'd underlined. Now that I knew the hidden passage existed, I couldn't unsee it. I paid cash, didn't want tracks to my car, and headed to the nondescript warehouse I owned on the outskirts of town. It was cluttered with my retired cruiser, boxes of case files, and a dusty ping-pong table that smelled of sweat and stale beer. I cleared a corner, spread out the blueprints, and laid over them the mansion's architectural plans from the county archives. On top, I placed the doll's cracked head in the recorder. I pulled out orange hazard tape and cordoned off the table like a crime scene. Then I turned to my gear: a battery-powered lantern, 2 heavy flashlights, rolls of duct tape, a pry bar, respirator masks, digital voice recorder, extra batteries, and a small revolver tucked inside my jacket. I didn't plan to use it, only to feel safer. There was no going back to SWAT, no official backup. I'd seen what happened when uniformed officers tried. They nearly lost the K-9 and almost it cost my career. This would be personal. I jotted notes: night of the 17th, start at ballroom, map hidden panel, explore control room, document everything, stay silent. I numbered binder sections, printed satellite images pinpointing the ballroom's skylight fractures, chalked foot-by-foot measurements. My coffee sat cold, forgotten. At 1900 hours, I donned my gear and drove back toward the Cartwright estate, alone, determined. My nerves buzzed like broken wires under my skin. I parked in the woods, no headlights gleaming on the driveway, and approached on foot, boots sinking in wet leaves. The iron gate was chained shut. I slipped through a loosened link. The mansion loomed, windows lifeless. I climbed through the ballroom skylight fragment, careful of broken glass, and dropped inside. The floor was slick with condensation, the air heavy with mildew. My lantern revealed floorboards scarred by heavy boots, footprints lined in mud. Stepping between toppled chairs, I moved to the north wall, where the hidden seam lay. My heart thudded like a drum as I felt the wool latch behind the molding. The wall panel swung inward, revealing the narrow corridor, lit only by the feeble glow of my lantern. I clicked on my recorder. Unofficial entry number 2. Retracing initial passage. Proceeding to control room to photograph and retrieve data. My lamp cast long shadows down the tunnel. I advanced, careful to avoid the wet stones that slicked the floor. The walls were damp, seeping threads of moisture. Footprints faded and returned, child-sized, then adult-sized beside them. I ran dusting powder in a test. Strips of chalk across the footprints made them glow pale white in my light. I snapped photos with my phone, prints leading to the iron-barred door. When I reached that door, I paused. The air beyond smelled stronger, earthy and stale. The rusted bars were cold under my gloved hand. I placed fingerprint tape across one bar. My own prints coated the metal. I jiggled the latch. It moved. The door swung inward a few inches, then jammed. I rubbed my palms together. The shaft of my lantern reflected dozens of letters etched into the stone walls. Names and dates. Some as recent as last year, others dating back to 1924. Panic curled in my gut. I didn't belong here, no one did, yet here they all were, marking time. I stepped into the chamber, lantern beam revealing a stone dais in the center, wires from the static box snaking into slots in the walls. A large circular indentation in the stone floor, almost like a ritual circle. I lifted the cover of the static box, corroded switches, a broken speaker and handwritten notes taped inside. Cartwright test bed. Subject A. Unspeaking. Persistent. My lantern flickered. I swore I heard breathing. 6 small, shuddering breaths beneath the hummed static. I set the doll's misplaced eye in the circle's center, testing the theory that the buildup of energy centered around that spot. The moment it touched the stone, the speaker crackled to life, spitting static that condensed into a voice. "You've come back." My stomach lurched. I whirled to find nothing, the lantern's glow wavering. Clicking off the speaker, I lowered myself to one knee, rifling through my bag for the voice recorder's external microphone. I attached it near the circle and pressed record. Then I backed to the center of the doorway to observe. Seconds passed in tense silence. Then, soft footsteps, tiny, dragging, circling the dais. The static box sparked, lights flickering. On the recorder I heard, faint but clear, "Welcome home, Lewis." My breath caught at the use of my name. I rushed to the dais, aiming the lantern downward. Nothing but circular scorch marks in the stone where the doll had rested. I bent to inspect the marks. No scorch, just discoloration and hairline cracks. I snapped photos. The lantern went dark. Heart hammering, I slapped it back on. The chamber was plunged into blackness, save for the wavering glow of my phone's flashlight. I swallowed hard, pulling out my revolver. "If you're here, show yourself," I demanded, voice echoing off the stone. Silence pressed in, then a whisper from the walls. "We," followed by a chorus of childish giggles, distant and hollow. My blood ran cold. I raised the gun and fired one warning shot into the ceiling. The bullet ricocheted, showering stone dust like snow. The sound seemed to weaken something. The giggles cut out abruptly. I seized the moment. I lunged to the iron door, yanking it open and sprinting down the tunnel. No footprints now, only my echoing boots. The corridor turned, dead-ended at the ballroom panel. I slammed it open, crawled out into the grand room, and slammed the panel shut behind me. My recorder was still going. Static hissed in the recording. Panting, I crossed the ballroom and scaled the window out, landing in muddy grass. I stumbled to my cruiser. The engine turned over without hesitation this time. As headlights swept across the mansion, I saw a faint glow in the nursery window. The doll's single ebony eye reflecting my beam, as if watching me. I pressed the accelerator and tore away. Back at my warehouse, I transferred every file, photos, audio, blueprints, onto an encrypted drive. I blew up the images, the etchings in the chamber walls, the scorched circle, the notes inside the static box. I listened to the recording. Faint voices shifting beneath static, fragments of conversation that made no sense. My head ached trying to follow them. I dumped the doll pieces into a secured evidence box and taped it shut, marking it Exhibit A, Do Not Open. Outside, the sky was pinkening with sunrise. The tasks ahead felt impossible. Analyze the recordings, interview historians about the Cartwright mythology, find anyone who might have entered the tunnels before. My personal mission had escalated into an obsession, one that would cost me sleep, peace, perhaps more. I stared at the evidence box in the drive. "This stays secret until I figure it out," I whispered. Every part of me ached to destroy the drive and forget, to tear up the blueprints and vanish. But I knew better. The Cartwright estate wasn't done with me, and until I uncovered the truth of those whispering walls, the static would never leave my mind, and the doll's grin would keep me up at night. I leaned back, exhaled, and tapped out a final note in my log. Mission scope expanded. The house had shown me its depths, and now I had to descend further. Silence greeted me, but my recorder lay open, waiting. I clicked save and closed my eyes for a moment, tasting adrenaline and dread. Tomorrow night I would return, one last push into the heart of that stone labyrinth, and this time I would not leave empty-handed. The warehouse overhead light swung in a slow arc as I packed my gear for the 5th time, the scent of oil and concrete pressing in. My eyes felt gritty. Too little sleep, too many hours replaying the same static-laced recording. But I couldn't stop now. Tonight would be the last descent into the Cartwright labyrinth. If I survived, I'd finally have answers. If not, well, nobody'd ever find me down there anyway. At 2300 hours, I slipped past the chained gate and climbed through the broken skylight, careful this time to wear knee pads and gloves. Learned that lesson the hard way. Inside, the ballroom was empty and deathly still, the moonlight pooling like spilled silver on the cracked marble. I paused to place motion-tracking sensors at the ballroom's 4 corners, an extra precaution if someone or something tried to follow me. My lantern revealed the hidden seam in the north wall, still faint, still ominous. I pressed the latch. The panel swung inward without protest. I clicked on my recorder. Unofficial entry number 3. Final descent. Objective: penetrate control chamber. Document entity. Extract any viable data. Backup files stored off-site. No external communication possible. The air in the corridor was colder, heavier, carrying a faint dry whisper that tickled my ear. At last. I swept my lantern down the passage. Footprints, once crisp, were now blurred, like the dust had been disturbed for days. I bet the journalists and thrill-seekers who tried to sneak in used this route too, chasing legends. I kept my head down, boots following the outline of the footprints, until I came to the iron door. Its bars were bent outward, as if something had clawed at them from the inside. I pressed my palm to the cold metal. Fresh rust, sticky, like blood mingled with earth. My revolver rested in its holster. I considered drawing it, but logic told me bullets wouldn't stop whatever waited. Instead, I worked the latch open and pushed the door inward. It groaned, a sound like tortured metal, revealing the chamber beyond. Inside, the circular dais stood as before, but the static box had been torn from the wall, wires hanging loose like entrails. The stone floor was scraped raw, shards of the doll's porcelain eye scattered around the circle's edge, and on the opposite wall, scrawled in dark ichor, was a single phrase: "You returned." The words something had carved with its nails. My breath caught. I trained my lantern on them. Each letter was uneven, elongated, as if carved by a child with a twisted sense of purpose. The air shifted. I swept the lantern to the dais and froze. In the center sat a figure, a small girl, pale, no more than 8, wearing a tattered dress that hung in damp folds. Her skin was ashen, hair stringy with grime, and one of her eyes was missing. The socket bled a dark ichor that dripped onto her cheek. She rocked gently, staring at the cracked circle on the floor. My heart hammered. My mind screamed at me to run, but duty, obsession, something held me in place. I forced myself to speak. "Who are you?" She tilted her head, hair falling to reveal the other eye, an obsidian orb that caught the lantern's glow. When she spoke, her voice was a hollow rasp, as if air forced through rusted pipes. "I'm the one you left behind?" Her mouth stretched into a jagged smile, one side higher than the other, revealing teeth chipped and blackened. I swallowed. I didn't know. She rocked faster. "You should have known." She tapped the stones with clawed fingers. I waited and I watched. "You brought me back to life." My breath hitched. I found you here. I thought you were trapped." Her laughter was a sick twist of innocence and malice, a child's giggle laced with static. "You freed me." She rose, limbs bending in unnatural angles. "And now you belong here too." She stepped off the dais, gliding across the chamber floor without a sound. My lantern flickered, the battery sputtering. I slapped it against my palm. It steadied. She stopped a few feet away, tilting her head. "Tell me," she whispered, voice soft and terrible. "Do you remember the lullaby?" A wave of memory crashed through me, a melody drifting down the hallway. The same tune I'd heard on my first night at the estate, the meeting of lullaby and static that had chilled me to the bone. I closed my eyes against the memory. "Stop!" She laughed again, a sound like crackling vinyl. "Sing, Officer Lewis." I shook my head, voice small. "I don't." She lunged forward, so fast I barely saw her movement. Her foot hooked the lantern, sending it flying. The beam scattered, exposing nothing but pure black. I yanked my revolver, but she was already at my side, her hand on my shoulder, cold as death. I fired a shot into the darkness. The bullet lodged in the stone wall with a hollow thunk. The world spun. I stumbled backward, tripping over the dais's edge, crashing to the floor. The girl was gone. The static box behind me crackled back to life, a surge of electricity charging the air. Lights flickered, low hum building into a resonance that rattled my bones. I crawled to my side, grabbing the recorder and shining its red recording light onto the stone circle. I spat into the mic. Entity present. One female subject, no confirmed identity. Behavior: childlike mimicry, can manipulate environment, resist at all costs. Static drowned out my words, then resolved into a whisper. "Your voice is mine." The girl's laughter echoed around me, louder now, as though the walls themselves had joined her. The circle in the floor glowed faintly, veins of light tracing the cracks. I stared, horrified, as the cracks began to pulse, like a heartbeat. My finger hovered over the door's latch. Staying meant death. Leaving meant the entity would follow me into the world beyond. Either choice was a trap. The glowing circle cracked outward, splintering like a spider web. From it emerged tendrils of darkness, smoke-like limbs that snaked toward me. I scrambled up, revolver useless in my sweaty hand. I backed toward the bars, each step slower as the tendrils advanced, hissing in torment. I reached the door, yanked it open with one hand, and dived through, slamming it shut. The impact echoed as metal against metal. I shoved my shoulder into the bars, but they bent, her power warping the iron. I braced my feet and kicked out, forcing the panels deeper into the corridor. The laughter followed me down the passage, soft, mocking. I ran, footsteps echoing like a drumbeat, until I burst back into the ballroom. Moonlight was gone, replaced by the harsh glow of lanterns I'd set at the corners. I crossed to the panel and sealed it, slamming 3 heavy cases against it to hold it fast. Behind me, the ballroom doors blew open, rattling the hinges. I turned to face the great hall, revolver raised, heart lodged in my throat. The girl stood there in the threshold, half in shadow, one eye gleaming. She tilted her head. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Forever." I squeezed my eyes shut, mind racing through every protocol, every exit strategy. Nothing worked. I exhaled and lowered the gun. "Please, just stop." Her head jerked, as though shocked. The oppressive laughter ceased. The static box somewhere deep within the walls crackled, then went silent. She took a step forward, hand extended, fragile fingers outstretched. "I'm lonely," she said, voice hollow. The roar of trauma welled in my chest. I remembered the nights I'd worked as a rookie, alone on call, haunted by memories of a daughter my partner lost long ago. Memories I'd tried to bury. Here was someone more lost than me. Something inside me snapped. I holstered my revolver. Slowly, I stepped toward her. She watched, unblinking. I reached out, fingertips brushing her arm, cold stone beneath flesh. She trembled. I'm sorry," I whispered. Tears stung my eyes. "I'll help you." Her grip on her laughter loosened. The darkness in her eye flickered. The static circle's glow faded. The bars behind her warped back into place on their own. The hidden corridor sealed with a click. For a moment, the mansion held its breath. The girl's cracked smile softened into something almost human. She placed a tiny hand over mine, the world still, weightless, as if time paused. Then, as I closed my eyes, I saw her face shifting. Child, then static-drowned visage, then my own hollow reflection staring back. I gasped, wrenching away. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. Only the faint outline of her footprints in dust remained, leading back into the sealed wall. The dais lay dark and cold. The static box was lifeless. I sank to my knees, lantern beam dancing across the empty hall. My chest heaved. I clicked off the recorder, shutting the microphone. The final entry remained unwritten, a confession only my mind held. I stood unsteadily, crossed the ballroom, and climbed through the skylight. Outside, the night air was cool and silent. I wiped cobwebs from my face, tasted tears and relief. The mansion behind me seemed smaller now, an empty husk awaiting the next soul. I climbed into my cruiser and started the engine. As I drove away, I realized the hush in my ears. The static was gone. For the first time, I heard nothing but the hum of the road and my own ragged breathing. Dawn's first light painted the horizon. I didn't look back. But when I closed my eyes that night, I still saw her, waiting just beyond the edge of sight, her empty eye socket glistening in the dark, and I whispered into the void, "I'll never leave you alone again." I didn't sleep that day. The warehouse felt smaller, walls pressing in, every creak in the ceiling a reminder of static whispers. I unloaded my gear for the final time. The cracked doll fragments sealed in evidence bags, the recorder and lantern both battery dead, spare batteries untouched. My binders were packed with photos, logs, blueprints, and scribbled notes. Now, I faced the impossible task of making sense of it all, and choosing whether to publish the findings or bury them forever. By dusk, I'd set up a command center. Laptop, external drive, 2 monitors and a whiteboard covered in diagrams of the Cartwright estate's hidden levels. I traced the hidden passage, the control chamber, and the iron-barred room, then circled the ritual dais in red. Alongside each element, I jotted the encounters, the whispers, the footprints, the childlike figure, and finally, that moment of connection, when I reached out and she held my hand. I stared at that last note, chest tightening. Was it relief or terror? The phone rang. Detective Martinez. "We got a call from your wife's number," he said, She's worried. Haven't seen you in 3 days." I cleared my throat. "Tell her I'm on a big case. Work emergency. I'll be home soon." He didn't press further. I ended the call, hands shaking. Home felt unsafe now. The walls might bleed shadows. At midnight, I reviewed the recordings, static and faint voices just below the hiss. I used audio filters to isolate patterns. A lullaby melody emerging from the noise, layered over whispers of names, including mine. I extracted the phrase, "Welcome home," repeated in different tones, male and female, child and adult. It confirmed what I'd feared. The Cartwright estate's entity was not a lone child, but something older, feeding on voices, memories, identities. I needed closure. I drafted a plan, return once more, not to explore, but to end it. I'd bring a scrying speaker, a device used in paranormal investigations to project and record EVP, electronic voice phenomena, hoping to communicate directly and negotiate a truce. If that failed, I'd perform a sealing ritual, reseal the panel, lock off the tunnels forever. It was reckless, but I had nowhere else to turn. I spent the next day assembling the speaker from surplus parts and a vintage megaphone, wiring it to a battery pack. I wrote a script. Call out the entity by name if I knew it. Offer to help release the trapped spirits of the Cartwright lineage in exchange for peace. I packed my bag, speaker, recorder, lantern, binder, water, and a small vial of holy water I'd taken from the precinct chapel. Symbolic, maybe useless, but it felt right. At 2300 hours, I drove to the estate one last time. The night was moonless. Headlights vanished into the courtyard's hush. I parked well off the driveway and approached on foot, heart thundering in anticipation. The mansion loomed like a sentinel, its windows dark wounds in the facade. I climbed through the skylight without hesitation, landing in the ballroom's center. I set up the scrying speaker on the dais, my lantern beam scanning the empty seats. I deployed motion trackers in the corners. If anything moved in response, I'd know. I placed the vial of holy water next to the speaker and clicked on my recorder. Final entry. Contact attempt. If this works, entity will respond. If not, proceed to seal the hidden passage. I'm ready. I took a deep breath, then spoke into the speaker's mouth. Cartwright entity, I know you're here. You've called to me, whispered my name and shown me your world. I want to help you and to find peace for you and for me. If you have a name, speak it now. I pressed the speaker's power switch. Static crackled, the device sputtering to life. The hush that followed was absolute, until the speaker emitted a low hum. Then, amid the static, a child's voice. I am Eveline. My heart thudded. Eveline Cartwright, the daughter who vanished so long ago. I whispered, Eveline, I'm here. You can trust me. The speaker buzzed, and then, as if carried on the hall's breeze, came her voice, soft, mournful. They took me, hidden, calling. Underneath, I heard dozens of overlapping whispers, voices of others trapped, ancestors missing souls, all melding into a chorus of sorrow. My chest tightened. I will open the doors and let you go, I promised, voice trembling. Static surged to a roar. The speaker rattled and almost flew off the dais. I clutched it, eyes closed against the cacophony. Then, abruptly, silence. I opened my eyes. The ballroom was empty. My motion trackers showed no movement. The hidden panel in the north wall stood slightly ajar, as though inviting me. I approached and pressed the latch. It opened to the dim corridor beyond. Footsteps, soft, hesitant, echoed within. I took the speaker and advanced into the tunnel, lantern in one hand, speaker in the other. The voices were gone. Only my own breath and the beam's whispers guided me. I followed the corridor to the iron-barred door. Eveline knelt on the other side, head bowed, hands resting on the bars. When I emerged into the chamber, the circle on the floor was unbroken, no scorch or crack. She looked up, tears trailing down ash-white cheeks. I knelt beside her and uncapped the vial of holy water, letting a few drops fall onto the stone. The water sizzled, sending ripples through the circle's edges. Eve's tears mingled with the hissing drops. "It's time," I said softly. She rose, fragile as a wisp, and through the bars came a gentle touch on my cheek, cool and damp. The speaker activated on its own, playing back my voice. "Eveline, go home." She smiled, something like peace flickering in her one eye, and placed her palm on the bars. The iron dissolved under her hand, melting into dust. I caught her as she stepped through. A small form, weightless, then gone. The static box's remains in the chamber ground to fine powder. Wires snapped like brittle twigs. The walls shook once, then settled. The tunnel behind me collapsed quietly, sealing itself without a trace. I stood alone in the hidden chamber. Silence pressed in, soft and complete. I turned and walked out into the ballroom, where lanterns still glowed. I closed the panel behind me, hearing the final click echo like a gavel. In the skylight, the first pale light of dawn crept through. I climbed out and stood in the courtyard, breathing in the cool air. The Cartwright mansion looked empty, silent, its secrets buried beneath the stone and dust. Back at the warehouse, I deleted the final recordings. No proof needed. I filed the blueprints and speaker parts away, then locked the binder in a steel cabinet marked classified. The doll fragments I kept. A reminder of a child lost and found. That night, I lay in my own bed, staring at the ceiling. No whispers came, no static, only my ragged breathing. I closed my eyes, expecting nightmares, but found only darkness and peace. In the stillness, I whispered one last promise, not to Eveline, but to myself. I will never abandon you again. And as sleep claimed me, I dreamed of a small girl with one bright eye, smiling in the moonlight, her silent thank you echoing in my heart forever. I eased my cruiser off the shoulder and killed the engine, letting the night silence wash over me like cold water. The dashboard clock glowed 22:03. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Detective Sarah Blake, 38, 15 years on the force, never believed in ghosts. Not until tonight. The call had come through 15 minutes ago. A motion detector tripped at the old Crestwood Manor on Maple Hill Road, followed by a 911 hang-up. The dispatcher said it looked like a false alarm. After all, the place had sat empty since the Ashtons fled in 1978. But policy was policy. Every alarm got a response. I clicked off the seatbelt, holstered my sidearm, and grabbed my flashlight. The gravel crunch under my boots sounded unnaturally loud as I approached the front steps. Moonlight sifted through a canopy of oaks, painting the peeling white paint of the porch in sickly half-tones. I ran a gloved hand over the banister, cold, damp, flecked with lichen. I flicked my light across the foyer. The wood floorboards buckled. Dust motes swirled in the beam. Portraits, long removed, left empty frames like hungry mouths. My radio crackled once, then went silent. I nodded into the darkness. "Just me," I whispered, though the words felt brittle. I clicked on the flashlight's highest setting and stepped inside. The door protested with a groan. Echoes leapt down the halls. My boots left footprints in the fine gray dust. I swept the beam down a long corridor, walls once lavish, now stained, wallpaper curling like dead leaves. My training told me to move methodically. I checked corners, windows, closets. Nothing but emptiness. Floor above creaked. I stiffened. It could be a stray animal. Raccoon, possum, Common rural nuisances. I advanced up the narrow staircase, hand brushing the buckled handrail. At the top landing, I paused. A soft hum vibrated through the floorboards, low, mechanical. I frowned. The manor's power had been cut years ago. I aimed the light at the hallway, 2 doors on the left, 1 at the end. The hum grew louder as I approached. I tried the first door, locked, but not with a key. A simple twist latch, corroded but movable. With a click, the door swung inward. My light spilled into a children's bedroom. A crib stood against the far wall, mattress bare except for tattered sheets scattered on the floor. A broken mobile hung above, its carved wooden animals missing limbs. The hum was louder here, too regular to be wind through broken windows. I moved closer, noticing scratch marks along the crib's frame. Deep gouges, as though talons or nails had scraped down the slats. My throat tightened. I swept the flashlight over the wall. Crayon drawing. Stick figures beneath a triangular roof, circle sun in the corner. One figure shaded entirely black. Beneath it, a single word scrawled in childish script. Alone. My pulse quickened. I thumbed my radio mic. Dispatch, Unit 32 inside Crestwood Manor. Check comms. Nothing but static hiss. I pressed again. Silence. I pivoted toward the next doorway. The hum faded, replaced by whisper-soft creaks from the floorboards. My boots felt clumsy in the thick layer of dust. I checked my breathing, steady, controlled. I stepped through the door into what had once been a study. Bookshelves empty, desk overturned. I kicked aside a fallen candlestick. It clanged against a metal box on the floor. I knelt, pried it open. Inside, dated folders, old police files, yellowed pages detailing missing persons in Crestwood County from the late 70s. My pulse shot upward. The Ashtons had vanished in 1978. Rumor said they left town, but I'd never seen official records. A sudden clatter echoed from the hallway. I spun, flashlight beam slicing through blackness. At the end of the hall, something moved, a shadow slipping into a room. I swallowed and edged forward. The hall stretched, each board creaking underfoot. I called out softly, "Pennsylvania State Police, show yourself." No answer, only the hint of movement just out of the light's reach. My hand drifted to my holster. I stepped into the next room, a makeshift nursery, plaster peeling from the walls in long ribbons. A rocking chair sat idle, cushions threadbare. The crib stood empty, but the mobile above spun slowly as if caught in a phantom breeze. The hum returned, low and insistent, vibrating the air against my eardrums. I scanned the nursery, heart pounding. Something glinted on the floor, a cracked Polaroid. I picked it up. The image showed the nursery exactly as it was, but the crib held a dark blur where a baby should be. No face, just a smear of black. My flashlight flickered. I slapped it against my palm. The light steadied. I pressed the image against my chest and called out again, voice firmer. "Who's here?" Nothing but the hum. I stuffed the photo into my jacket pocket and turned to leave, only to find the doorway gone. In its place was a solid wall of aged plaster. My breath caught. I backpedaled, chest tight. I scanned the room, searching for another exit, and saw it. A low trap door beneath a threadbare rug. My heart thundered. The hatch looked new, fresh wood against dying floorboards. I set the Polaroid on a nearby stool, clipped my mic to my collar and tapped it. Dead. No reflections or echoes answered me, only the distant drip of water. I pried open the hatch. The hinges creaked, releasing a chill draft. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. It wavered in my trembling hand and peered into the darkness. No ladder, just a yawning void. I steadied myself. In the interest of inquiry, I muttered, echoing department phrasing I'd used millions of times, "I'm proceeding." I secured my belt around my waist and lowered myself into the pit. The walls scraped my uniform as I descended. I landed on cold stone, wiped dust from my knees, and swept the beam around. A narrow corridor stretched before me, slick with moisture. My flashlight glinted off damp locker doors lining both sides, each door labeled in faded white paint. The first read, Ashton Michael, the next, Ashton Lillian. The tally continued down the line, 5 names, then 6, then one door bore no name, only tally marks, 7 tallies. Beneath them, scrawled in charcoal, "Not games." I swallowed hard. My mind raced. The Polaroid had shown 7 tallies. That number echoed in my chest. A soft chuckle drifted down the corridor, childlike, distorted. I raised the light higher. The corridor ended in a barred iron door, cracked open just enough for my beam. The hum became a whisper. "Welcome home." I slipped through the gap. Beyond lay a cavernous chamber lit by a single bulb swinging overhead. In the center, raised on a concrete dais, sat a child's tricycle, its red paint peeling, seat torn. The whisper grew louder, layering into many voices chanting, "Return." They sounded like children, dozens of them. I raised my pistol, scanning the darkness beyond the light's reach. Shadows skittered across the walls as if something moved just out of sight. I quivered, but forced myself forward. The concrete edge crumbled beneath my boot. I leaned into the beam. Etched around the dais, scratched into the floor, names matching the lockers, each crossed out with a single slash. At the dais's edge lay 7 worn shoes, child-sized sneakers, sandals, arranged in a circle. The whisper rose to a keening wail, my breath fogged in the cold air. I looked up, the bulb flickered and died, plunging me into blackness. Panic bloomed. I fumbled for my radio. Nothing. The slippers of light from my flashlight were swallowed by the darkness. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst. Then, from the silence, a single footstep echoed on concrete. One shoe sliding across the floor, then another. 7 staccato taps. They surrounded me. I spun, mouth dry, chest heaving. The voices fell silent, leaving only my ragged breathing. I stifled a sob. My flashlight caught the tricycle's handlebar. No child, just the metal cold under my fingertips. I choked back bile. "I'm leaving," I whispered, turning to climb back toward the hatch. But the ceiling was gone. A sheer shaft of darkness rose above me. No hatch, no ladder. My blood ran cold. I pounded the dais's edge with trembling fists. "Help me!" I screamed, voice cracking. The only response was hollow echo. Then, behind me, a soft gurgling giggle like water in a broken pipe. I flattened myself against the dais, pistol raised. Tears blurred my vision. The temperature dropped, breath crystallizing on my jacket. A shape shimmered beyond the edge of the light, tall, thin, head tilted. It lingered at the edge before stepping forward, half visible. The beam caught a gloved hand, pale as bone, reaching toward me. I squeezed the trigger, but the sound never came. My flashlight spun out of my grasp and clattered into the circle of shoes, plunging me into complete darkness. I felt a small hand close around my ankle. My shout froze in my throat. Then that whisper, right in my ear, "Stay with us." And the shoes began to shuffle in, one by one. In the flickering beam of my flashlight, the dusty foyer walls of Crestwood Manor looked more like cavernous stone than the ornate plaster they once were. I had been standing in that marble-floored entryway for longer than I wanted to admit. probably close to 5 minutes, listening to my own breath and the faint hiss of static through my radio earpiece. The dispatcher's last words floated unanswered behind me. Unit 32, do you copy? Over. Nothing but dead air. I forced my legs to move. Each step along the warped oak floorboards sent a tremor of anxiety racing up my spine. The air was unnaturally still, like the moment before a sudden clap of thunder, and the only light came from my torch and the low glow of the moon seeping through cracked, stained glass panes above the front door. My holstered pistol felt absurdly heavy against my hip, my taser's cool metal a reminder that this was still official business, even though I'd long ago stopped believing in haunted houses, or at least in ghosts. But the cracked portrait frames lining the walls, all empty now except for a few warped canvases, felt like eyes watching me. I stepped into the central hallway, hearing a distant drip, water, maybe, or something thicker. I swung my flashlight to the left and saw a wrought iron chandelier dangling by a single rusted chain, its once brilliant crystals dulled and coated with grime. I remembered reading in the dispatch notes that a burglary alarm had gone off here a week ago. They'd called it another false trigger. But with each step further in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something real, something urgent, was happening beyond that alarm panel. My boots crunched over broken glass near what had once been the grand sitting room. The furniture had been cleared out years ago, leaving only the hearth's blackened mantel and a few empty spittoons in the corners. I swept the light across the walls, water stains radiating like spider webs, gouges in the wood panels, and a series of tally marks etched into a lower beam, 8 of them, then 9, then 10. Underneath, scribbled in cursive that might once have been elegant, now scratchy and uneven, "They come at night." I swallowed hard, throat dry. I clicked off the radio mic. Dead. I tapped the earpiece. Static. My negligence in maintaining contact would raise hell when I returned. But right now, protocol felt distant, less important than finding a rational explanation for all this. I moved on, gripping the flashlight like an anchor. A narrow staircase spiraled upward to my right, the banister gone, revealing treads that had rotted through in several places. I paused at the bottom, listening. The only sound was the hiss of my breath and the faint rhythmic creak as the house settled. The beam caught a small portrait at knee height. An oil painting of a family. Father in a 3-piece suit, mother in a high-collared dress. 2 small children clutching her skirt. Their eyes, though painted, seemed alive, solemn and accusing. I ran my gloved fingertip over the smudged glass. The mother's hand bore a smear of something dark, dried, flaky. I jerked back, heart pounding. I'm Detective Sarah Blake, 15 years on the force, no stranger to dark scenes. But nothing in my career had prepared me for this. A call about a creaking floorboard. A single motion sensor trip with no image captured. Now I was alone in a house whose history had been whispered in Crestwood County ever since the Ashton family vanished here in a single night back in '78. No bodies, no suspects, just an empty house and rumors of phone calls in the dead of night. Cries, laughter, static riddled with faint voices. I steadied my breath, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. The hush felt charged, as if the house itself were holding its breath in anticipation. I turned and climbed the stairs, every step a protest as it creaked under my weight. At the top landing, the hallway stretched into 3 doors, left, center, and right. The door on the left was ajar. Light spilled from it, though there were no windows in that room. I edged closer, trying to pinpoint the source of the glow. It was too steady, too soft to be moonlight. With a swift kick, I nudged the door open. My flashlight slammed into the floor with a dull thud, skidding to the base of the bed. It lay half buried in dust, beam pointing toward a single illuminated object. An old television screen, perched on a battered nightstand, flickering in grainy black and white. Static, snow, then a looped image. The entryway I'd just traversed, filmed from a low angle, as if someone, or something, had set up a hidden camera days ago. No timestamp, no audio. Just that same sputtering whisper trapped in the static, as though someone was calling out through the fractured waves. I lunged forward, yanked the TV plug from an outlet that shouldn't have been live, and the screen went dark with the sigh of electricity dying. My ears rang. I shuddered. Beside the nightstand was a journal, bound in cracked leather, yellowed pages exposed. I knelt, flipping it open with trembling fingers. The entries were dated September 1978. First person, penned in a precise hand. I hear them scratching beneath the walls. The children cry in their sleep, but no one answers. Father says it's just the wind. I think he's lying. There is something alive in this house. Tonight I will open the hatch beneath the nursery closet and see for myself. My pulse quickened. I read on. The writer detailed strange noises, whispered warnings on the radio, steps that moved outside the door. The final entry was incomplete. Words trailing off mid-sentence, ink widening into a dark stain. I forced myself to stand, tucking the journal into my jacket. Every police instinct screamed to retreat, but I needed answers. I flashed my light down the hallway, center door. I moved toward it, ankles dull with fatigue, mind hazy with questions. The door handle turned easily, revealing nothing but darkness. I swept the beam across an empty room, peeling floral wallpaper, a rickety crib in the corner, curtains drawn tight against broken windows. No sign of cameras, no sign of anything but dust and decay. The hush was oppressive, as though the walls themselves bore witness. And then I heard it, a soft squeal, like rusted springs in the crib. I spun the light back. The crib mattress was gone, leaving an empty frame. A single, solitary spring hung loose, scraping against the slat beneath it. I approached, compelled by a combination of disbelief and grim duty. My hand slid along the wooden railing. It was ice cold. I shivered, breath fogging in the chill. Beneath the springs, carved into the wood in shaky letters, "Don't wake her." My heart hammered. A distant creak sounded, floorboards above or below. I froze, straining to hear. The static hiss of my radio crackled again. Over it, a whisper, "Leave." The voice was so faint I thought I'd imagined it. I yelled into the mic, "Dispatch! Report!" My own voice echoed, swallowed by silence. I needed to see beneath this nursery floor. The dispatch protocols be damned. I had to know what lay hidden. I scanned the room, eyes landing on a faded rug. It covered a rectangular seam in the floorboards. I dropped to my knees, peeling it back. The seam revealed a heavy wooden hatch secured with an iron latch. The metal was fresh. No rust, just crude scratching across the surface where the latch had been worked open and closed repeatedly. I tasted bile in my mouth. There was no place for this in rational policing, no precedent. Yet here it was, a secret entry in a room left to rot for decades. I clipped my mic again, dead. I clicked off my safety on the taser and set my weight on my left hand, braced to push. The latch gave with a sudden snap, the sound reverberating so loud I jumped. A stale draft rose up. Damp earth, oil, that same sour perfume smell. I glanced once more at the shadows behind me, at the empty crib and the silence pressing in. Then I grasped the latch and pulled the hatch open. The beam from my flashlight fell into a yawning void. No ladder, just darkness. My breath caught, legs trembling. Protocol called for backup, for evidence preservation, for hazard assessments. But my blood pounded louder than procedure. I edged forward, feeling the thin wood planks give slightly beneath my weight. I remembered the journal entry. I will open the hatch beneath the nursery closet and see for myself. It ended there, ink pooling like spilled blood. I slid the flashlight down into the pit. The beam traveled 10 feet before picking up rough stone walls, slick with moisture. A low murmur echoed from below, almost like crying, maybe more hissing. My fingers tightened on the flashlight's handle, knuckles white. I forced one foot off the floor, then another, and allowed myself to descend, the ladder of splintered wood invisible beneath my boots. As I disappeared into the pit, the hatch rattled closed above me, sealing me inside Crestwood Manor's darkest secret. I eased my cruiser off the shoulder and killed the engine, letting the night silence wash over me like cold water. The dashboard clock glowed 22:03. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Detective Sarah Blake, 38, 15 years on the force, never believed in ghosts. Not until tonight. The call had come through 15 minutes ago. A motion detector tripped at the old Ashton estate on Maple Hill Road, followed by a 911 hang-up. Dispatch logged it as a false alarm until I got eyes on the scene, but policy was policy. Every alarm got a response. The gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the porch steps. Moonlight filtered through the skeletal oaks overhead, casting fractured shadows on peeling white paint. I raised my flashlight. Its beam trembled slightly in my grip, and pressed the doorbell. Nothing. Static hissed through my radio earpiece. I clicked the mic. Unit 32 on scene. Checking comms. Only silence answered. The heavy front door yielded under a firm push, swinging inward with a brittle groan that echoed through the entry hall. Dust motes drifted in the flashlight's circle, dancing like phantoms. My boots crunched on broken glass near the threshold, shards from side windows long cracked, waiting for some trespasser to exploit the weakness. I swept left, shining the beam across the foyer's cracked marble tiles and the debris littering the floor. Shards of porcelain, rotted fabric, remnants of lives once lived here. I moved slowly, methodically, training drilled into me to clear corners, check behind doors, scan ceilings and walls. The manor's interior was a study in decay, wallpaper curled away from plaster in long, ragged strips. Water stains spread like ink blots, and every surface was canvassed by fine, gray dust. Portrait frames hung empty on walls, their gilded edges dulled and pitted, as though whatever had driven the Ashtons from this place had sucked the life from these halls. Halfway down the central corridor, I paused at a large archway carved with ivy motifs. Beyond lay the grand sitting room, its high windows boarded, shutters rotted away. I stepped in, boots stirring a layer of dust so thick it muffled my footsteps. A fireplace dominated the far wall, its hearth blackened by long dead embers. On the mantel, a single tarnished spittoon sat in the corner as though placed by a careless hand. I trained my light on the hearth. Dried footprints led away from it, small and irregular, like a child's sneakers. My pulse jumped. The footprints ended at a toppled chair, its legs snapped. I backtracked, following the prints to a bookcase at the room's edge. Slats of wood lay broken beneath it, and the lower shelves gaped empty. I crouched, brushing dust with my gloved hand to reveal a seam in the floor beneath. Carefully, I lifted the corner of a threadbare rug, musty, moth-eaten, and exposed a hatch secured by an iron latch. Fresh scratches marred the metal, no more than weeks old. I ran a finger along the etchings, tally marks, 7 of them, scratched into the latch's underside. Beneath, The words, "Come home," were carved so newly that the wood splintered under my touch. My breath caught. I thumbed the radio again. Dead. I clicked the earpiece against my ear, a mental note to raise hell at a roll call for the dead channel. But right now, the manor's hush felt more dangerous than any protocol violation. My hand slid for my holster, thumb flicking the retention switch on my taser. Training and instinct warred. Investigate further. Duty bound, or retreat to safety. Curiosity won. I unlatched the hatch. The metal shrieked against wood, a sound too loud in the silence. A stale rush of air spilled forth, smelling of damp earth and something else, like old perfume soured by rot. I swept my light down the opening, a black void. No ladder, just the edge of stone steps descending into darkness. The manor's splintered banister rattled behind me as the hatch settled. I toggled my flashlight to high beam and knelt at the pit's edge. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I gripped the beam tighter and eased myself forward, bracing my offhand on the hatch rim. My boot scraped stone, and I tasted adrenaline as I lowered myself down. Each step was slick with moisture, the air growing colder, thicker, as if the house exhaled its secrets in that hidden chamber. I landed on rough-hewn stone, my knees cracked against the uneven floor. I looked up, a narrow corridor lined with lockers, cloakroom-style metal doors flanking both sides. Each door bore a nameplate, tarnished brass reading Ashton, Michael, Ashton, Lillian, Ashton, George, Ashton, Clara, until the final locker, blank except for 7 tally marks crudely scrawled with charcoal. Beneath, a smeared smudge looked disturbingly like a fingerprint. I swallowed. My flashlight beam danced across the doors, catching faded stickers of cartoon characters, anachronistic in this dank undercroft. A low hum vibrated through the walls. Mechanical? Organic? Impossible to tell. I took a step forward. The beam caught on something in the far end of the corridor. A small wooden stool and atop it, a battered Polaroid photograph illuminated by the narrow beam. I limped closer, my ankle protested, but I needed evidence. I snapped the photo into focus. It showed the nursery upstairs, the crib, mobile broken, peeling wallpaper, but in the crib sat a small figure, face obscured by darkness. I pressed the image closer, heart racing. A whisper came through the corridor so soft I thought it was my own breath. "Stay!" My head snapped up. The corridor behind me was empty, my footsteps the only sound. I turned and advanced toward the cell door at the corridor's end. Iron bars, half open. Beyond, a vast chamber yawned, lit by a single swinging bulb that hummed with electrical life despite no known wiring. Concrete dais in the center, child-sized tricycle abandoned sideways, paint chipped and rusted. Around the dais, 7 pairs of small shoes arranged in a circle. I swallowed bile. This wasn't a prank. Not paranormal lore or local legend. This was real. Somewhere above, the manor creaked, like breath, like a warning. Ew. My radio crackled faintly, dead again. I stepped onto the dais's rim. Footprints on concrete, 7 of them, each crossed out in chalk. I pressed my finger against one slash, still wet, glossy. Fear clotted my gut, but I forced my legs to move. I raised my hand, pressed my palm to the tricycle's handlebar. Its cold metal pulsed beneath my touch. A child's giggle, distant, echoing. I staggered back. The bulb flickered, shadows dancing across the walls in distorted shapes. My flashlight beam jittered. I realized the hatch above had snapped shut. The shaft was gone. Solid stone ceiling pressing down. My throat clenched. Panic surged. I yanked at the iron door. It resisted. The hum grew louder. voices layering into a chorus. "Don't leave." I jabbed the taser at the lock. No shock, no spark. I slammed my shoulder against the bars. They held. My flashlight flickered once more and died. Darkness swallowed me. I pounded the door, shout torn from my chest, "Help!" Only the echo answered. A small hand brushed my ankle. The shoes began tapping in the circle. 1, 2, 3. I backed against the concrete wall, breath frost in the air. Then, from the shadows, a pale hand reached for me, ghostly and impossible. My scream froze. The hum ceased. Silence fell so absolute I could hear my heart. And then, in my ear, the whisper, unmistakable, "You're ours now." I hit the damp stone floor and rolled, the impact jarring my shoulder. My flashlight spun in my hand, its beam slicing through the darkness to land on a slick patch of what looked like moisture, and something darker. I spat out a mouthful of dust and scrambled upright, the concrete dais looming behind me, shoes scattered in their silent circle. My ankle throbbed, each pulse a reminder of my folly in descending without backup. But retreat wasn't an option. The hatch above was sealed by stone. I turned toward the corridor, scanning for another way out. The beam caught on one of the lockers, its door ajar, hinges creaking. I limped over, flashlight illuminating chipped paint and a child's scribble across the metal. "Play with us." The words blurred as my chest tightened. I knelt and peered inside. A single toy soldier lay atop a pile of what I dared not name. A leather-bound family album, stained brown. I hesitated only a moment before yanking the album free. Its cover cracked ominously. Inside, sepia photographs. The Ashton family smiling before this very nursery, unaware of whatever darkness lurked below. Then a series of shots I recognized instantly from the Polaroid. Nursery, crib, that smear of black in place of a baby's face. The last few pages were blank. Ink had been scraped away. My stomach lurched. Whoever, or whatever, had taken those photos hadn't wanted them seen. A distant rumble echoed through the chamber. The concrete floor shivered beneath my boots as if something massive stirred beyond the pool of light. I raised my voice, trembling. "Pennsylvania State Police, if anyone's up there, I need to know you hear me." My words were swallowed by the gloom. The rattling grew louder. Then, without warning, a section of the corridor's stone wall cracked. Fragments of rock showered onto the dais. I stumbled back, flashlight beam dancing over fresh fissures that traced a jagged path toward the ceiling. From the crack emanated a faint glow, unnatural, greenish, pulsing like a heartbeat. My mind raced. Training told me to secure the perimeter, call for specialized units, keep evidence intact. But the sight of that glow and what it implied sledgehammered through every protocol. I edged forward, ankle threatening to give way. The glow beckoned. I forced myself to climb onto the dais again. Notebook and journal jammed into my jacket pocket. The green light pooled from behind the crack, illuminating more tally marks carved into the stone. 12 of them, 7 crossed out, 5 fresh. Next to them, written in deep gouges, "You came." Without thinking, I pressed my hand to the crack. The stone felt warm beneath my glove, throbbing with a force like a living thing. A low vibration hummed through the air, resonating in my bones. I heard voices far off but distinct, children singing a lullaby in perfect unison, distant and distorted, layered 3 or 4 times, then fading into silence. My grip tightened on the flashlight. The light caught a reflection behind me, something metallic half buried in dust near the dais's edge. I knelt and parted debris, revealing the hatch from above, its underside now exposed. A wooden plank, broken at one end, lay across it. Hope flared. Maybe I could force it open, climb out. I grabbed the plank and wedged it under the edge. My arms trembled as I pried, but the wood held fast against stone. Then the lullaby returned, softer, coaxing, and then one single child's voice, insistent, "Not yet." I froze, blood cold. The plank slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. I lurched backward, nearly losing my balance. The green glow pulsed brighter, flickering like a beacon. A low roar, like wind rushing through tunnels, filled the chamber. The crack widened, and the glow spilled out in a torrent. I stumbled away, heart pounding, flashlight beam sweeping wildly. From that fissure stepped something tall, too tall, its outline barely human. Long limbs, spindly fingers tipped with something like talons, skin stretched too tight over bone. Its head tilted, and where its face should have been was a smooth surface, featureless, yet I sensed it watching me. On its chest were 7 tally marks, raw, and bleeding into the stone where they'd been carved. It lifted a hand, and the air vibrated with children's laughter, echoing laughter that wrapped around my mind, tugging at memories I didn't want to recall. My legs gave way. I dropped to one knee, flashlight clattering from my grip and rolling into shadow. The creature advanced on silent feet, green light pooling at its heels. I reached for my service pistol, fumbling with the grip, but my hand shook too violently. Instead, I yanked my radio from my holster and pressed it to my mouth. "Dispatch, Unit 32 is down." My voice broke. Only static answered. The creature stopped inches from me. My chest heaved as it bent forward, that featureless face level with mine. The green glow refracted off its smooth surface, and in it I saw my own eyes, wide, terrified. Then a whisper so close I felt hot breath on my ear. "You belong." I screamed and fired blindly, the shot echoing through the cavernous chamber. The bullet thudded against stone. The creature recoiled, limbs jerking as if struck. The roar of laughter crescendoed, drowning out every other sound. I scrambled backward, fingertips scrabbling for purchase on dust-laden concrete. In that moment of chaos, I saw the hatch above shift, a sliver of moonlight piercing through. The plank had snapped time enough to allow movement. Summoning every ounce of strength, I lunged for the hatch's edge. The creature's talon-like fingers brushed my ankle, cold as obsidian, but I wrenched myself upward. My fingers found the broken plank. I hauled myself through the opening and slammed the hatch shut. The stone groaned as it settled into place. Darkness swallowed the chamber again. I collapsed against the hatch, gasping, head spinning. My flashlight lay beside me. I lunged for it and clicked it back on. The corridor was empty. No creature, no green glow, no tally marks fresh, only 7 lockers, silent guardians of an impossible secret. Trembling, I climbed the ladder of splintered wood, each rung a prayer that it held. I emerged into the nursery's dusty gloom, chest heaving. The rocking chair was still. The Polaroid in my pocket burned against my thigh. I slid off my jacket, retrieved it, and pressed the photo to a light fixture. There, I saw it again. Me, in that corridor of lockers, kneeling before the crack as green light washed over my uniform. My radio crackled then, impossibly alive. "Unit 32, status." My voice was hoarse. I'm reporting unusual conditions. Evidence of forced entry below. I need..." Static swallowed me. I stumbled from the hatch and into the hallway, mind reeling. The manor's front door was nowhere in sight. Every corridor looked the same. I realized with growing dread that I had no orientation. The tall portraits, once familiar, now looked alien once more. And behind me, from just beyond the Polaroid's glow, came the softest of whispers, so faint I almost didn't hear it. Stay, play, forever. I turned, pistol raised, but the hallway was empty. My reflection flickered in a tarnished mirror. Pale face, wild eyes, uniform torn and stained. I touched my collar, felt the damp chill of something slick. Blood? Oil? I didn't know. I backed away slowly, mind numbed by terror. I needed to escape that labyrinth. I needed fresh air, daylight, anything. My ears filled with the echo of that lullaby, drifting down corridors, promising that I could never leave. And then, at the end of the hall, I saw it. A pair of small footprints in the dust, leading toward an arched doorway where faint light spilled through. No hatch, no trapdoor, just a path forward. I swallowed hard, voice trembling as I whispered to myself, "This is my last chance." I stepped forward, placing my weight on the foothold, not daring to look back. As I crossed the threshold, the lullaby crescendoed one final time, then cut out, leaving a silence so absolute it shook me to the bone. I paused in the doorway, breath shallow. Beyond lay a stairwell ascending into brighter light. My legs trembled, but I forced myself upward, every step a battle against the dread that tried to pull me back. At the top, I emerged into the manor's vestibule. Moonlight streamed through the front door's stained glass. My cruiser sat where I'd left it. I stumbled across the foyer, shattered glass crunching beneath me. I yanked open the door and ran, keys fumbling, engine roaring to life. As I sped down Maple Hill Road, the manor's silhouette receding in my rearview mirror, I pressed my hand to my cheek, smeared with grime and something sticky. I blinked and saw it in the mirror. A child's handprint, palm and fingers, etched across the glass. My chest tightened. I gripped the wheel, voice hollow as I whispered, "You never left." The world outside was still. Too still. My cruiser's headlights cut swaths through the fog as I tore away from Crestwood Manor, but I could feel it watching. Hollow halls alive in my rearview mirror. I swore I'd get a full report filed, evidence logged, support called in. Yet with every mile, every heartbeat, doubts gnawed at me. What was real in that house, and what had I imagined in the dark? Back at the station, I found the halls empty, the vaulted ceilings of the old building oppressive in their silence. Latitudes of fluorescent light buzzed overhead as I stumbled in, clipped my service weapon into the armory lockbox, and rifled through my jacket pockets. The Polaroids fluttered out, 7 in total, each showing a child's silhouette in that nursery. I laid them on a metal desk, the images stark in their emptiness. Without thinking, I sorted them chronologically. The first, the earliest, was the cleanest. Nursery, exactly as I'd seen it. The next showed a shadow flicker across the crib. By the 7th, the entire room was soaked in green luminescence, that featureless thing standing in the corner. I tapped my badge against my hip. Detective Sarah Blake, professional, experienced, logical, should have radioed for backup. Should have called the chief. Should have photographed the hatch, the lockers. But I'd come back with nothing but bruised bones and ghost stories. My phone buzzed, jolting me. On the screen, unknown caller. I hesitated, then answered, static. A child's voice, hollow. "Why did you leave us?" Then click, deadline. My hands trembled. I slammed the phone closed and stood, pacing the length of the desk. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't trust daylight to wash away what I'd seen. My partners knew me as unflappable, never missed a shift, never cracked under pressure. But this was different. I gathered the Polaroids and journal, bundled them in an evidence bag, and set out again for the manor. Daylight Drive. I needed to verify, to prove this wasn't some twisted dream. By the time I reached Maple Hill Road, the sun had climbed overhead, golden rays dancing through the trees. But Crestwood Manor wore its age less kindly in the light, the paint a jaundiced yellow, windows boarded with rusted sheet metal, ivy straggling up the walls. I clicked off my engine and approached on foot, journal secure in my satchel. The front door was ajar again. Dust swirled at my boots as I stepped inside. Everything was quieter than before, but not peaceful. Doors that hadn't moved now swung slightly. Furniture that had been cobwebbed now lay overturned. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam puncturing the gloom, and wound my way back to the foyer. The hatch in the sitting room that I'd pried open was firmly closed, but this time, beneath the rug, the latch was missing, ripped clean from the wood. Scrape marks led toward the nursery stairs. I followed them, heart slamming. Each step up the staircase was a question. Was I safe? Was I sane? At the top landing, I paused, listening. Only the clap of my own breathing. I slipped into the nursery. Sunlight filtered through the cracked shutters, casting bars of light across the floor. But the nursery wasn't empty. The rocking chair faced the shuttered windows, gently swaying, no breeze stirring. I took a step forward, boots echoing. The crib lay toppled, mattress gone, mobile broken. My flashlight beam swept the corners. On the wall, charcoal marks still read, "Don't wake her." I swallowed hard. The leaden weight of that warning pressed against my lungs. I crossed the room to the closet where the hatch had been. The door was missing, a splintered wood mangled at the frame. Inside, the floorboards were intact, no seam, no trapdoor. I pressed my palm against the wall, cold, smooth stone. Then, behind the plaster, I heard it, a faint scratching, like nails tapping from within. My flashlight trembled. I drew my service revolver, my backup weapon, rarely needed, and aimed at the wall above the closet. One shot cracked through quiet. The plaster fractured, revealing a web of cracks. Dust rained down. I braced myself and slammed the butt of my weapon into the hole. More fragments fell away until a hand-sized gap opened. Beyond, darkness. I pressed my face to the opening. The corridor below lay just out of sight, but I could hear breathing, slow, deliberate, and singing. My pulse raced. I should have retreated, called for HAZMAT, structural engineers, ghost hunters, any rational protocol. Instead, I eased my revolver barrel into the gap and fired twice. The shots sounded muffled. There was a shriek, inhuman, wrenching, and then silence. I climbed onto a chair, straining to peer through the gap. Nothing moved. The nursery was still. The closet door frame groaned as I hauled at the remains of the door, prying it wider until I could slip my head and shoulder inside. The floor was dust-coated, undisturbed, save for a single footprint in the center, a child's bare print, toes splayed. I knelt and placed my palm in the print. Cold. I pulled back and surveyed the room. Sunlight fell on 3 Polaroids, taped in a triangle on the plaster. The first, the third, the fifth. Someone had been here, capturing moments, placing them. The newest photo, taped in the lower corner, was mine, kneeling in the corridor of lockers. That night, yes, but I'd left the camera behind. Someone had crawled through that hatch, found my evidence, then retaken the shot and returned it. A whisper behind me. You can't hide. I whirled, gun raised. No one, only stillness. My throat was dry, parched. I dropped to my knees, fingers brushing Polaroid corners. The dates scrawled on the backs. September 5th, 1978. September 12th, 1978. September 19th, 1978. And on mine, June 9th, 2025. Tomorrow. My knees buckled, chest constricting. I crawled backward, eyes darting. The closet burst open behind me, splinters flying. My revolver barked once, twice, empty clicks. Then I felt cold metal at my temple. I froze. A voice soft and distant. "It's time to wake her." I didn't resist. I closed my eyes and waited for the blow. The tunnel smelled of mildew and old decay, its walls slick beneath my palms as I clawed my way forward. Each footfall echoed off low stone arches, the beam from my flashlight flickering against damp bricks until it steadied on a pile of broken boards. I pressed my back against the wall, shoulders heaving, and listened. No more humming laughter, no distant giggles, only the steady drip of water and the pounding of my own heartbeat. I knew this passage must connect deeper into the house's foundation, but every inch felt like a move away from safety. I forced myself to stand, legs trembling, and set off again. The corridor bent sharply, leading to a larger chamber where the air grew colder still. Frost rimed the edges of crates stacked in a corner, pallets of old files and rotting furniture. My flashlight skimmed across a set of rusted office chairs and an overturned desk. Whoever had used this space had abandoned it in a hurry. I edged past the desk, careful not to disturb the debris, and the beam caught, etched into the wall above a filing cabinet. The same tally marks I'd seen on the hatch and the lockers. 7 tallies, precise and brutal. Beneath them, scrawled in a hurried hand, "The cradle waits." My throat closed. The nursery. But why cradle, not crib? Something about that phrasing spoke of ritual, of intention beyond the macabre. My eyes flicked to the floor. Dirty footprints led around the room, each print small and uneven, as though someone had fled in terror, dragging a bare foot. I followed them, heart hollow, until they vanished behind a fallen beam. I ducked under, and my flashlight landed on a ladder bolted to the far wall. The metal was cold and slick with condensation, but it offered a possible escape, or at least a way up. I placed a foot on the lowest rung and winced as my ankle protested. Each movement sent a spike of pain up my leg, but I climbed, ascending into deeper darkness. The chamber above was smaller and mustier, lit by a single bare bulb overhead that flickered like a dying eye. Here I found a narrow hallway lined with peeling wallpaper, faded children's nursery rhymes printed in pastel blocks. Wheels on the bus go round and round, now turned macabre by rain-stained tears. At the end was a door unlatched. I pressed my palm to the cold wood and pushed. The hinges groaned, revealing a room that had once been an office. A desk still stood, its surface covered in ledgers and notebooks. I swept the flashlight over them, entries spanning decades, meticulously detailing auditions and rehearsals for the occupants, with dates and times and names. March 3rd, 1978. Clara Ashton, passed. George Ashton, failed. Lillian Ashton, passed. The final pages, dated June 2025, bore my name. Sarah Blake, scheduled. My breath caught. I sank to one knee and rifled through the top drawer. Inside, beneath a layer of moth-eaten files, lay a black leather-bound booklet titled Children of the Manor. The cover was embossed in silver script that had dulled with age. With shaking fingers, I opened it. The pages detailed the manor's darkest secret, an occult experiment carried out by the Ashton patriarch, who believed that childhood innocence could be weaponized against death. 7 children, 7 souls trapped to fuel a ritual that would grant the head of the family immortality. The hatch, the tunnel, the chamber of shoes, all designed to contain and harvest their essence. I slammed the booklet shut, nausea curling in my gut. The humming began again, low, insistent, growing into a cacophony of children's voices, chanting nursery rhymes off-key. The walls seemed to pulse as the words pressed at my mind. I knew I had to destroy this room, these records, anything that might allow the ritual to continue. I drew my service pistol and fired at the desk legs. Wood splintered. The bulb overhead shattered, plunging the office into semi-darkness. Sparks danced as wires sparked behind the shuttered window. The chant rose, then fell silent only long enough for me to recognize a sound behind me. The soft clicking of small shoes advancing down the hallway. I spun, light sweeping across the floor, 7 pairs, lined up as though waiting for me to join them. The chant erupted again. The cradle waits. I backed up, shooting at the rafters, but the bullets splintered wood and rattled metal, the noise deafening. Hands, tiny, skeletal, reached out from the walls, clawing at my jacket. I ripped free, stumbling toward the door. The hatch's ladder was behind me, but the office door began to close on its own, slammed shut with a force that buckled the frame. Darkness swallowed the corridor, the rusted bulb flickering its last. I dropped to the floor, gasping, and braced myself as the floorboards beneath my knees began to pulse, as if a heartbeat beat in the wood. The chanting voices blended into one voice, familiar yet distant. "Welcome home, Sarah." A pale hand reached out of the floor at my feet, fingertips grazing my boot. My vision tunneled as panic and pain crashed together. I crawled toward the desk remains, dragging the Children of the Manor booklet. With a cry, I jammed it into the crack in the floor, pages fanning out. I struck a match from my pocket, brass striker glowing. The flame hissed as I pressed it to the leather cover. The booklet ignited, flames licking the edges, turning pages to ash. The heat was immediate, searing. The chanting exploded into screams of rage and agony. I crawled backward, tearing at the ladder bolts until the rungs fell away. The office ceiling groaned, plaster raining down. The bulb popped, plunging me into near blackness, illuminated only by flickering flames licking the edges of the pit. Then silence. The flames died in an instant. The smoke sucked into an unseen breeze. The floor stilled. The pall of dread lifted for a breath. I pushed myself upright, my ankle shattered in the blaze, each step agony. I found the remnants of a hatch handle and pried open the ceiling panel above where the office lay. The opening led back to the nursery closet, but now I saw it clearly. The hatch was gone, ripped away by the blast, leaving only jagged edges in the floor above. I forced myself through the gap, dragging my broken body into the nursery. Moonlight seeped through the windows. The room was silent. The crib frame was empty, the walls bare. I paused, searching for any sign that the manor would not relent. A single Polaroid lay on the floor, my face, pale and gaunt, staring back. Beneath it, smeared charcoal spelled, "Parting Gift." I let tears burn hot down my cheeks as I collapsed against the nursery wall, every breath a battle. The manor creaked around me, ancient wood settling. A final sigh in the darkness. And then, as dawn's first light crept through the shutters, the whisper came again. So soft I wasn't sure I heard it. "You can't leave." The realization struck me like ice. I'd destroyed the booklet, but the ritual had been completed long ago. The Ashtons had bound those children's souls here, in me, in this house. And now, as the sun rose, I understood the truth. The cradle never lets its children go. I pushed myself to my feet even as my ankle seared with every breath of movement. Dawn's light spilled through the nursery windows now, casting pale shafts that did nothing to warm the air. The room felt impossibly still, too still, like a tomb. Yet beneath that silence throbbed the echo of something ancient, something that claimed me as one of its own. I limped toward the doorway, wincing with each step. The hallway beyond was bathed in early morning glow, dust motes drifting like motes of memory. Everything looked different in daylight. The peeling wallpaper, the fractured floorboards, the broken spittoons in the sitting room. Each detail that had felt grotesque in shadow now appeared merely dilapidated, almost ordinary. And that ordinary veneer was more terrifying than any darkness. I reached the foyer and paused, breathing ragged. My eyes settled on the front door, a sturdy oak frame inlaid with panels of stained glass, depicting a child reaching for a star. The glass was cracked, one shard missing, leaving a jagged gap. I stepped toward it, hand pressing to the cool wood. The latch responded easily, no chains, no deadbolts. I pushed. The door swung inward, revealing the fog-shrouded estate grounds. The asphalt drive curved toward the gatehouse, where iron bars stood sentinel, rusted by time. I took a step outside, bracing against the cold. Behind me, the manor exhaled. A sigh carried on the wind that rattled the broken windows. In that exhale, I heard faint laughter, childlike, joyful, and incongruously bright. My stomach lurched. I forced my focus on the driveway, toes skimming frost-kissed gravel, as I limped toward my cruiser. Every footfall felt like a negotiation with the world. Part of me wanted to run, to smash the accelerator and never look back. Another part, darker and fiercer, knew that running wouldn't end it. Well, what used to be the estate's wine cellar. Bone fragments consistent with children, some dating back nearly 50 years, others more recent. They want you to confirm identification. My stomach rolled. Arrange for DNA analysis, but keep it discreet, I said, voice tight. No press. We treat this as missing persons, not supernatural. If word gets out, we'll have amateurs and journalists swarming the place. Carson agreed. I'll handle it. He hesitated. Blake, are you going back in? The question hit me harder than any bone fragment. I closed my eyes. The weight of it settled in my chest, like tiny hands pressing on my ribs from the inside. You know I have to, I whispered. They need me to help identify the remains, to bring some closure. I paused. But I'll take backup this time. Armed with evidence teams, and a chaplain, maybe a psychologist, someone to verify my condition. I forced a shaky laugh. Protocol. Carson's sigh came through the line. I'll arrange it. Be safe, Sarah. I hung up and sat in the fading twilight staring at the Polaroids. The images felt personal now, like a map of souls tied to that house. I thought of the children. Michael, Lillian, George, Clara, and the others. Children who'd vanished into darkness, leaving echoes in walls and tally marks on wood. The wind picked up outside, rattling the window panes. I shivered, despite the humid summer air. The house on Maple Hill Road waited for me, its corridors shifting, its rituals never fully ended. I folded the Polaroids and placed them in an envelope. Exhibit A. Tomorrow, I would stand at the manor's gates, flanked by officers, evidence techs, and whatever experts the department deemed necessary. We'd burrow into its hidden depths again. We'd find the well, unearth the remains, and close one chapter of horror. But as I lay in bed that night, sleep refused me. In the hush of my apartment, I heard faint scratching at the walls, and a whisper, clear and calm. We're still here. And in that moment, I realized the Ashton children had never left Crestwood Manor. Not truly. Their cradle awaited in the shadowed corridors, and now it awaited me. I forced myself out of the interrogation room and into the garage bay, heart still hammering. The estate team was suiting up, uniformed officers checking flashlights and radios. evidence technicians slinging cases of swabs and sample bags, a coroner adjusting a body-bagged stretcher. At least a dozen vehicles lined the concrete floor. Patrol cruisers, unmarked SUVs, and the coroner's van. I swallowed against the knot in my throat. This was real now, not myths or sleepless hallucinations. Physical remains would emerge, bones and soil and answers. Lieutenant Carson fell into step beside me. His morning calm was brittle like fine china in a storm. "Ready, detective?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, meeting his steady gaze. "As I'll ever be," I whispered back. Out in the creeping dawn, fog clung to the lawn of Crestwood Manor. The building loomed like a cathedral of rot, windows black hollows, ivy strangling every brick. We crossed the gravel drive and paused at the front door. The evidence team snapped photos of the threshold. No wreckage this time, no forced entry. I pressed my hand to the oak, still cold, still unyielding. A memorial ribbon fluttered nearby, left by relatives of the missing Ashtons. 7 names on a makeshift wreath. Michael, Clara, George, Lillian, Mark, Sarah, and Emily. A chill pinched my spine. Sarah, my own name, curled in the slick black print. I exhaled slowly. We split into groups. Carson led the perimeter sweep. I joined the forensic team headed to the east wing, where the wine cellar well lay buried beneath collapse. They had already excavated a shallow pit and uncovered fractured boards. Lab techs in coveralls crouched at the edge, sifting through damp soil. I knelt beside them, dipping gloved fingers into the cold earth. A fragment of ceramic caught my flashlight's gleam, white bone shard. I set it into a paper tray, careful not to smudge potential DNA. The coroner murmured, "Here." He pointed to a cavity in the wall lined with aged stone, an old ventilation shaft leading down. The techs assembled a portable strobe light and superimposed a scale bar. Under the light, bones protruding from soil glinted white. I leaned closer. A small femur, a tiny skull fragment. Ours or the Ashtons? It felt like unwrapping someone's childhood secrets. A voice crackled over my radio. "Detective Blake, we need you at the hatch beneath the nursery." Urgent. My pulse spiked. I rose and sprinted back across the lawn, past the wreath and the silent windows. The nursery hatch, the threshold to that undercroft, now lay exposed. The technicians had pried out remnants of the broken plank I'd left, widening the square for safety. Inside the manor, sunlight slanted through the nursery's shuttered windows, spotlighting floating dust. The hatch yawned in the center of the floor, edged in sawed wood. Carson and a sergeant balanced at opposite corners, ropes tied for safety. A certified structural engineer inspected the frame. I knelt and peered inside. No shimmering green light, no featureless figures, only darkness. A line was lowered. We hoisted up a motion-activated camera on a telescoping pole. I watched the feed on a tablet, descending past oak beams into the corridor of lockers I'd first discovered. The metal doors stood silent, shuttered. At the end, the iron cell door lay open. The dais beyond was empty. No shoes, no personal effects, only damp stone. Then the camera passed the final locker, the one that bore 7 charcoal tallies. This time, someone had added an 8th tally, fresh and ragged. I inhaled, fingers tightening on the tablet. 8? Who had been down here after me? The team on the surface hadn't expected any additional marks. My jaw clenched. I pressed the up arrow, but the feed froze. Static, then a flicker of white. Flat line. I pocketed the tablet and stood. Carson laid a hand on my shoulder. "We'll get that documented later." He nodded toward the well entrance, a squat door set in the northeast wing's stone foundation. Coroner wants to confirm forensics firsthand. Together, we descended a temporary staircase. Damp earth gave way to carved stone walls. We stepped into the undercroft proper, flashlights bobbing. The air was thick with dust and the muted drip of groundwater. At the far end, the well's circular opening yawned. Pipes and rigging had been erected for retrieval equipment. A forensic pathologist reached inside with a gloved arm to pull out a burlap sack. She set it on the stone rim. We all gathered round as she cut the cord. Inside lay fragments of clothing, tiny trousers and a plaid shirt, stiff with decay, and scattered bone shards bound by hair. The coroner crouched to inspect. At least 2 individuals, one juvenile between 6 and 8, one younger, maybe 4. He snapped photos. I swallowed. Those ages matched Clara and Michael Ashton. I recoiled. Why 2? 7 disappeared. Why only 2? My voice echoed. The coroner shook his head. Taphonomy's uneven, but lab analysis will tell. He closed the sack and set it aside. All right, I want this sealed, and the hatch sealed back up at day's end. I looked up at the corridor's low ceiling. Thin cracks crawled across the stone like spider webs. From one fissure, a drop of water fell, plink, into the darkness. I strained to hear more. Was that laughter? I set my jaw. Carson stepped forward. Let's wrap this up. He paused at the hatch. Detective, anything to add before we close it? I thought back to the shackled dais, to the tally marks, to the ritual journal I'd burned, to the children's spirits bound to this place, to the 8th tally. My mind swirled with questions, but the coroner and engineers needed to leave. The scene was not for my personal crusade. I closed my eyes and spoke quietly. Seal it, but get a watch posted, and schedule another dig, West Wing tunnels. I met Carson's gaze. Because this isn't over. He nodded, uncertain. Copy. Outside, dawn unfurled into a harsh sun. The wreath still fluttered in the breeze. Names forgotten by most now. Children's names printed on ribbon, but a detective who bore one of their names would not forget. As the hatch was battened down and the equipment wheeled away, I stood beside the engine room's roar, watching the manor shrink behind the mass of SUVs and tape lines. My radio crackled. Unit 32, clear scene. All clear. I clicked off, fingers numb. I turned once more to Crestwood Manor. The wreath's ribbon fluttered, and for an instant I thought the names shifted in the wind, the letters rearranging themselves, B-L-A-K-E. A child's giggle echoed faintly in my mind. I swallowed hard. Protocol demanded closure, but some places keep their secrets. I climbed into my cruiser, the engine idling. My reflection in the rearview mirror was pale and drawn. I placed a hand on my heart. Beneath my uniform, I felt the tally marks burning into my skin, 7 of them. Another invisible mark to bind me here. I exhaled, vision blurring. As I drove away, the morning light glinting off the gravel, I carried with me a single, haunting truth that refused to let go. I am one of them now. The cruiser's lights swung across the overgrown driveway as I eased to a stop. 22:17 on my watch. Beyond the windshield, the old Caldwell Manor sat squat in the midnight haze, its turrets and broken mullioned windows half hidden by tangled vines. I killed the engine and leaned forward, ear pressed to the radio. Static. No dispatcher update. Not even a crackle of background noise. I tapped the push to talk. Nothing. My pulse quickened. I stepped out, boots crunching on loose gravel. The air was unnaturally still. The kind of night where every insect hushes and the world seems to hold its breath. I grabbed my flashlight in one hand and my service weapon in the other, checking its ready light, green. The beam cut a pale cone through the darkness, bouncing off creeping tendrils and peeling paint where the front door's paint had long since blistered away. A single porch light flickered, its bulb sputtering like a dying heartbeat. Caldwell Manor, I murmured to myself. Routine suspicious person call. My breath puffed in short clouds. I clicked the radio again. Silence. Couldn't take chances. I tapped the maglite against my belt. The glow from its tail cap was a promise I hoped I'd never have to keep. I nudged the heavy wooden door. It swung inward on rusted hinges with a groan that echoed up into the attic rafters. Floorboards sighed under my weight as I stepped onto a threadbare oriental rug littered with dead leaves and broken glass. My light swept across a grand foyer, a sweeping staircase crawling with shadows, its banister chipped and splintered, carpets bunched into motley swaths on the landing. The stench of damp plaster and mildew hit me like a wall. I coughed once, then forced myself to move forward. The hallway stretched to the left and right. Faded portraits and cracked frames lined the walls. Stern-faced men in high collars, women in hoop skirts whose eyes seemed to follow me. My hand brushed the cold brass of the doorknob to my left. I hesitated, then twisted it. The door resisted, then gave with a squeal. Inside was the drawing room, sagging furniture encased in yellowed sheets, and in the center a massive crystal chandelier, its crystals matte with dust, swinging ever so slightly as if stirred by a phantom breeze. I swept the flashlight upward. The ceiling's ornate plasterwork was gouged and cracked. A single panel had collapsed, revealing darkness in the loft above. My throat tightened. I should have called for backup, but there was no one on the radio, only me, alone, stepping deeper into a place nobody lived, and yet something was here. Hello? My voice cracked. Portland PD, anyone here? I kept it low, professional. The only answer was the distant drip of water, like a leaky faucet in the kitchen beyond. I crossed the room, heart thumping as the beam passed over a grand piano, its lid propped open, yellowed keys chipped. On the music stand lay a stained sheet, a sonata, half torn. I crouched to examine it. The margins held a scribble in a childlike scrawl. I'm sorry, I couldn't stop them. My stomach dropped. I flicked my gaze to the far doorway. It led into a long corridor shrouded in darkness. Steeling myself, I entered. The flashlight bobbed, illuminating archways and broken door frames. I heard a faint click behind me, like a latch snapping shut. I whirled, shining the beam back toward the drawing room. The door was closed. No breeze, the hinges had no draft to move them. I swallowed, lifted my radio. Dead. I exhaled slowly. Keep it together. I pressed on. About 30 feet down the hall, the floor sloped, and I caught the sour scent of rust. Then I saw it. Half a handprint, smeared in oxidized brown along the doorframe. My flashlight tremored in my grip. I crouched to inspect. Not fresh. Age crackled through it. But still, a handprint where no one should have been. I rose and found the door at the end of the hall. It was ajar. Beyond lay a stairwell plunging into blackness, each step warped and waterlogged. Something about that open door felt like an invitation. I shouldn't go down. Protocol said wait for backup. But my radio was dead. If there was someone in distress downstairs, they'd die waiting. I checked my taser, ensured it was armed, and took a breath. I descended. The beam danced across stone walls slick with moisture. The air grew colder, each exhale a sharp echo. Halfway down, I heard a soft thump, like a fist tapping on wood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun. Nothing but darkness. I gripped the maglite tighter and continued down. At the bottom, the stairs opened into an archway. I shone the light through. A long corridor of cells like an old asylum. Rusted doors were chained shut. Each had a tiny window, cracked and fouled. As I passed, a low, rhythmic whisper rose around me, so quiet I almost missed it. But then it became clear, a soft chant, repeating the same 2 words. "Don't leave." I froze. My blood ran cold. Who would chant inside an empty corridor? I stepped closer to the nearest cell. The window was smeared. I leaned in. The flashlight's beam illuminated a juvenile face drawn on the grime. 2 hollow circles for eyes, and a crooked slash for a mouth. Beneath it, in chipped white paint, someone had scrawled, "They see us." I jerked back, heart pounding. The whispering stilled. Footsteps at the far end, slow, deliberate. Something shuffled. I raised my weapon, trained the beam down the corridor. A shape flickered at the edge of light, a hunched form, too small to be an adult, moving from one cell to the next. My breath caught. I called out, "PD! Show yourself!" The words trembled. The figure paused, then dissolved into the shadows. My blood turned to ice. I swallowed, took a step forward, and the cell doors on my left and right slammed shut simultaneously, rattling their chains. Sparks flew off the metal. The walls vibrated with a hollow clang that resonated through my chest. I fired my taser reflexively at the door chain to my right, but the beam hit empty air. The chain was undisturbed. A whisper in my ear, so close I jerked my head. A static burst in my earpiece, and then a child's voice whispered, "Help me." Then laughter, soft, echoing, slithering down the corridor. It reverberated off the stone. I spun, swinging the flashlight toward the cell windows. Every cell had that same drawn face now, as if they'd all come alive. I counted 7 of them, each face staring, unblinking. My radio crackled once, a single click, then died. The corridor lights overhead flickered, casting everything in strobing darkness. In each flash I thought I saw movement. The hunched figure closing in, its head tilting sideways unnaturally. I seized my mag light, brought its bezel edge down on the first cell door. Metal screamed under the blow, chains rattled. In the strobing light, rust fell away, and the door swung inward as if unlocked by unseen hands. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The corridor went black. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and then settled into a steady beam again. The cell was empty. No child, no figure. Just darkness and the faint drip of water hitting the stone floor. I heard the whisper again, "Stay." I backed up the stairs 2 at a time, the beam jittering. Behind me, the chanting resumed, louder now, a chaotic chorus. "Stay! Stay! Stay!" Each "stay" overlapped, layering into a grinding roar that rattled my nerves. I reached the top and burst into the hallway, slamming the door behind me and jamming my shoulder against it. The chanting stopped. I stood there, panting. The manor's front door lay dead ahead, swathed in shadow. The faint yellow porch light flickered. My radio lay discarded at my feet, still dead. I knew I had to leave, but something drew me back. A tall window above the doorway caught my eye. In its cracked pane, I saw my reflection. Uniformed, weapon in hand, eyes wide. Then, behind me in the glass, a second reflection. Taller, hunched, its head tilted. I spun, flashlight swinging. Nothing. I backed away, every muscle screaming. I reached the front door, wrenched it open, and stumbled onto the porch. The manor loomed silent behind me. Windows dark, except that single upstairs pane, now blacked out. My cruiser's headlights were nowhere to be seen. Either my backup never came, or it had driven off. My reflection in the window caught my eye one last time. Alone, breath fogging against the glass. Then the pane cracked in a spiderweb pattern, as if something had pounded from inside. I didn't wait to find out. I sprinted for the cruiser, vaulted into the seat and slammed the door. The engine roared as I spun the wheel onto the gravel. Headlights cut across the yards as I tore away, the manor shrinking behind me until it vanished into the night. My radio crackled back to life just then, dispatcher checking my status. I switched it off. Some calls aren't worth an explanation. I drove on, headlights illuminating nothing but empty asphalt and the racing beat of my heart. The road out of Caldwell Manor stretched endlessly before me, the cracked asphalt glistening under the cruiser's headlights. My hands shook on the wheel, knuckles white, pulse hammering in my ears. I kept driving north on Highway 26, putting distance between myself and that place, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every mile marker I passed, 23, 24, 25, felt tainted, as if the manor's darkness had seeped into the night itself. I reached the junction for Fircrest Road and slowed, glancing in the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the empty highway flanked by dense pine forest. I exhaled, flicked the switch on my dashboard light to check the time. 1:03. 2 hours had passed since I arrived at the manor. 2 hours of horrors I still couldn't fully comprehend. I tried my radio again, static. I pressed the PTT button, DEA 5-4, requesting update. Nothing. It was as if every channel had gone dead. I reached over to the passenger seat and grabbed my notebook, flipping it open. I had scribbled notes during my descent into that basement asylum. Cells, chanting. Faces drawn in grime, whisper, "Stay." Reflection, head tilted. It read like the rantings of a deranged mind. A man in my position didn't write about that kind of thing, and yet I had seen it with my own eyes. I closed the notebook and slammed it shut as if trying to force myself to forget. Ahead, the road curved east toward the town of Riverton. My house was another 20 minutes beyond that. A small bungalow, neat lawn, yellow porch, light always on. Call it habit. I flipped the signal and turned onto the gravel entrance of the county dispatch tower, a squat brick building set back from the highway. Backup wasn't coming to Caldwell, not tonight. Best I could do was file a preliminary report, then call for a team first thing in the morning with fresh volunteers. My gut told me that returning at dawn would be another mistake, but I had to follow protocol. I parked under a bare bulb that flickered overhead. As I stepped out, the chill air bit through my uniform. I pulled the collar tight and tugged the radio from my belt. The door to dispatch was locked. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. Headlights spilled across the empty parking lot. Inside, I should have heard the hum of computers, the chatter of calls, but everything was silent. I reached into my coat pocket to grab my keys and froze. Hanging from the key ring was a small porcelain doll's head, one glassy eye missing, the other staring wide. My stomach clenched. I didn't remember putting it there. The last time I'd seen that doll head was in the nursery at Caldwell, on that crooked shelf. It had felt like a child's toy until I saw its head turn. After I fled, I thought I'd dropped it. But how had it appeared on my keys? I stared at it, light glinting off its cracked cheek. A whisper in my ear, "Don't leave." My breath caught. I shivered, brushing the doll away and tossing it into the grass. It landed with a soft thunk, glass eye glinting briefly before settling. I knocked again, louder. When no one answered, I pulled my spare key and unlocked the door. It swung open with an ominous creak, revealing a darkened foyer. Dispatch consoles sat cold and lifeless, screens blank. I flicked on my maglite, its beam dancing over stacks of paperwork and empty coffee cups. The silence felt oppressive, like the building was holding its breath. I navigated down the hallway, checking each room. Radio room, records, break area, empty. The air smelled faintly of burned circuits, like something shorted out. My light caught the corner of the supervisor's office open just a crack. I stepped inside. The desk was overturned, drawers yanked out, papers strewn. A single sheet lay on the floor. Typed words circled in red. "Don't come alone." My pulse spiked. I scanned the room. On the bulletin board, pinned beneath dispatch schedules and wanted posters, was a child's drawing. A house with 3 windows. 2 adults flanking a small child in the middle. Beneath it, "We're here." I backed out of the office, heart racing. Against every training instinct screaming at me to leave, I felt compelled to go deeper. I turned the corner and entered the radio room. Consoles lined the walls, wires snaking like living vines. One radio speaker crackled to life with static, then clear, a child's laughter. It bubbled and warped, like it was coming through warped circuitry. I panned my flashlight to the center console. A tape recorder sat there, its record light blinking. I pressed the play button, and a woman's voice whispered, "Tell him to stay." The tape cut out. The laughter resumed. I grabbed the handset and slammed it against the desk. "Portland PD," I barked, voice echoing. "Dispatch, do you copy?" The static answered me. My reflection in the glass of the radio tower's exterior window wavered. A uniformed officer hunched over controls, pale face lit by flashlight. Behind me, the faintest movement, like a child darting behind me for cover. I whirled, flashlight beam slicing across the room. Nothing. I jumped as the door slammed behind me, rattling the frame. I bolted for it, but my foot caught on something. I stumbled, catching the doll head again. It sat on the linoleum, right where I had tossed it outside. My palm burned where I'd grabbed it. I caught my footing and raced down the hallway, footsteps pounding behind, but I didn't dare look back. I burst through the front door into the night, dust motes sparkling in my flashlight beam. The dispatcher tower yards were empty, save for my cruiser. I sprinted toward it, fumbling for the door handle. As I neared, headlights flared at the edge of the parking lot. 2 vehicles idling with bright beams trained on the tower. Sheriff's SUV marked Riverton PD Cruiser. Backup had arrived without radio warning. I dove into my cruiser just as the beams shone my way. I cut the engine and sat in darkness, panting. After a moment, the sheriff's door opened, and Lieutenant Marquez stepped into the light, hand resting on her holster. "Harris," she called softly. "Status?" Her voice was calm but urgent. I blinked, stood and opened the door. I swallowed. The word lodged in my throat. "It's empty. Calm silence. Something's wrong." I gestured behind me to the tower. "Dispatch is ransacked. Tape recorder, the doll head." I rummaged through my jacket and produced the cracked porcelain skull. Marquez's eyes widened. She held out her hand. "We'll secure the tower," she said, voice steady. "You okay?" I nodded, but my limbs felt like lead. I gave Marquez a quick debrief. Caldwell Manor first, the chanting, the faces, the whispering. Lyrics of a half-forgotten nursery rhyme pounding in my memory. She listened without interruption, jotting notes. When I finished, she folded her arms. "You saw something, heard something. We believe you." Her affirmation was a relief, like falling from a great height, but the unease only deepened. Together, we walked toward the dispatch building. Marquez flicked on her flashlight and led the way. The door stood ajar, as I'd left it. She called for a search team, then scooped up the recorder from the console. "We'll get answers," she said. but her eyes held a flicker of doubt. As the team arrived and began clearing the building, I stepped back, scanning the perimeter. The air was still unnaturally quiet again. My flashlight beam caught the road leading back to town. In the distance, headlights blinked. I exhaled, tension easing slightly. Marquez called my name, marching back. "We've got nothing on cameras, doors forced from inside. No sign of who or what did this." I nodded. "Then we go back to Caldwell at first light," I said. "Bring engineers, site consultants, everybody." Marquez looked at me for a long moment, then exhaled. "Get some rest, Harris." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out." I forced a smile, but my stomach churned. Rest felt impossible. The doll head lay in my palm, its cracked grin grotesque. I wrapped it in an evidence bag and handed it over. As Marquez turned to organize the team, I stepped aside, staring at Caldwell Manor's silhouette against the night sky, its dark windows like hollow eyes watching me. I knew sleep wouldn't come. My nightmares would be filled with chanting children and jagged whispers. I'd see that tilted reflection every time I closed my eyes. And when dawn came, I'd have to face that manor again, where logic bent and memory faltered. But one thing was certain. I wouldn't be alone this time. The sky was a bruised purple when we rolled up to Caldwell Manor again, 5:47 on my watch. Dawn's muted light barely penetrated the low-hanging clouds, casting the place in a wan, unwelcoming glow. Behind me, Marquez's SUV and 2 patrol cars parked in a loose semicircle, their emergency lights off to avoid spooking wildlife or revealing our position. A forensic van and a mobile command truck idled behind us, engines humming softly. I cut the cruiser and climbed out, every muscle still tight from the night's adrenaline. My boots crunched on the dew-laden gravel as I slung my bag over my shoulder, feeling its weight like an anchor. Marquez joined me, coffee in hand, breath misting in the chilly air. "You sure you want to be first in?" she asked, voice low. I nodded, turning my gaze to the manor's looming facade. "Better me than someone new," I said. "I know this place now, enough to lead the way at least." She offered a half smile and handed me a thermos. I took a long pull. The heat settled in my gut and steadied my shaking hands. By the front entrance, 2 crime scene tape units had set up an evidence tent. Technicians in Tyvek suits were dusting for prints and photographing every cracked pane, every rusted hinge. A drone hovered overhead, its lens pivoting to map the grounds. Marquez unrolled a laminated site plan. "We've got engineering here to shore up the stairwell, medics on standby, a chaplain if, God forbid, anything happens," she said. I nodded, scanning the scene. "Let's stick to the plan. Secure the perimeter first, then clear rooms one by one, 2 officers per team. You and I will head down to the basement last." "Copy," she said. "Just like clearing an abandoned warehouse, except this," she waved toward the manor, "is anything but ordinary." Her words echoed in my mind. I squared my shoulders and approached the front door, pausing at the threshold. The door frame still bore the indentations where I'd fought to get out last night. I ran a gloved hand over the splintered wood, memory pulsing through me like electricity. Then I exhaled and stepped inside. The foyer was colder than I remembered, frosty air seeping in through gaps in the walls. My beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the chipped portraits whose painted eyes still seemed to track me. A faint whine drifted from the grand piano in the drawing room, as though last night's music box had been replaced by ghostly chords. I swallowed and moved forward, boots whispering across the oriental rug now textured with frost. Teams fanned out into the side wings. I watched as Detective Alvarez eased open the study door across the hall, cuffing the handle and sweeping the room with a sidearm. I flicked on my own taser light. The study's walls were lined with broken shelves, volumes strewn across the floor like fallen soldiers. A fleeting blur at the corner of my light arc made me freeze, just a trick of dust motes dancing in the beam. I forced my heart rate down and signaled to Alvarez. He nodded, and we slipped out. Marquez was in the main corridor, consulting with the structural engineer. The old staircase had been reinforced overnight with steel beams and planking. They'd shored up the risers and tightened loose banisters. I ran a hand along the rail, solid now. I ascended first, thinking of the whispering cells that lay beneath this floor. The landing above held the nursery, its door sealed with numbered evidence tape. I peeled it away and swung the door open. The room was pale and empty, the rocking chair still mid-sway, the doll's shattered head nowhere to be seen. I swept the beam across the crib, no sonata sheet anywhere. Only the hush of morning and the weak gleam of my flashlight. A pat on my shoulder made me jump. Marquez stood behind me, eyes narrowed. "Clear," she said. Her tone was professional, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her gaze. We closed the door and moved on. Down the hall, the corridor to the guest chambers had been blocked off with police tape. I remembered those doors hanging open, revealing nothing but darkness. Now, teams were methodically scanning each room, announcing "clear" through the comms. My earpiece hummed with everyone's status. Statics, location updates, methodical, steady. Except, in my mind, I still heard the chanting, the laughter, the whisper. "Don't leave." I stopped at the door leading to the stairwell. The wood frame was smooth again, and the paint was fresh from the shakers who'd whitewashed last night's bloodstains. I checked my flashlight and holstered my weapon, knowing that beyond this point, lethal force might be the only line between us and whatever lurked below. Marquez tapped her comm. "Teams 3 and 4, you're up. Rooms 1 through 6. We're clearing the lower levels next." I took a steadying breath, squared my shoulders, and went in. The stairs were less treacherous now, no warped boards, no dripping water. I descended slowly, counting each step to keep my nerves in check. At the bottom, the archway to the corridor stood open, framed by the flickering beams of police torches. I signaled to Marquez, and we entered side by side. The corridor of cells had been cordoned. Forensic techs were photographing every window, every latch. Some cells had been forced open with bolt cutters, exposing empty rooms that smelled of mildew and decay. I swept the flashlight along the walls. The faces drawn in grime had been documented, scrubbed off by cleaning crews, and tagged as evidence. I caught one cell where residual smudges remained, ghostly outlines of eyes and mouths. I crouched to examine. Under ultraviolet light, the shapes glowed faintly, as though painted just yesterday. Marquez called me up. She pointed to one end of the corridor. "Engineers want to check the structural supports here." The masonry around the arch was crumbling. Bricks had shifted. We stepped aside, letting them set up a small hydraulic jack to shore the arch. I watched the beams settle, the stones vibrating softly with mechanical pressure. Every creak made me tense. Behind us, a tech opened cell 12 to reveal nothing. Just a rusted toilet and a shattered window. But then he paused, shining his flashlight at the far corner. I joined him. There, on the wall, someone had etched letters in the damp plaster. "I see you." Not drawn, but carved, grooves as sharp as a knife's cut. My breath caught. The letters were fresh. The surface hadn't had time to rehydrate. Who had done this overnight? And why wasn't it there before? I jabbed at the comm button. "Marquez, we've got etching in cell 12. I see you. Looks new." She was at my side in an instant, face pale. "Who cleared yesterday?" she asked. The tech shook his head. "I was here all night. Someone sealed the cell and cleaned up outside. No one would have had access except—" His voice trailed off. I knew what he meant. This place was under guard. Only police personnel. Marquez crouched to photograph the etching. "Don't touch," she said. "We'll collect samples." She looked up at me. "This is beyond stencil paint or marker. That's etched in deep." I swallowed. "We need to check the rest of the corridor again. Every wall, every door." She nodded, turning back to the techs. We moved on, heads swiveling as we advanced. In the next cell, evidence bags lay untouched on the concrete bench. A doll head had been placed there, one glassy eye missing. I felt nausea rise. That was my doll head. It lay sealed in an evidence bag on the command truck. How had it returned here? I reached out to touch the window. Frost clung to the glass. Fingerprints marked the cold pane. I traced one stark imprint. A small hand, palm flat, fingers splayed. The shape matched a child's hand. My radio crackled. "Harris, HQ wants a status update." I flipped open the mic. "Be advised, we have new etchings in Cell 12 and evidence tampering. Doll head relocated to Cell 13. Static, then Marquez's voice. "Copy, sending forensics. Everyone, maintain perimeter. No one enters or leaves without logging." She turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded, but my voice caught in my throat. I felt sick. She guided me out of the corridor. "Let's regroup in the foyer," she said. We emerged onto the stairwell, and I looked back down into the shadows. 2 cells remained sealed, their doors unbroken. A hush zone the techs had marked. The chanting in my head rose faintly. "Don't leave." I swallowed hard. "Those cells," I said. "They were sealed with tape last night, but now they're not." Marquez's brow furrowed. "Which means—" I trailed off. She finished. "Someone's been here since." In the foyer, the morning teams were gathering. Detectives with notepads, medics checking equipment, a chaplain whispering a prayer in a corner. I caught Alvarez's eye. He shook his head. No signs of forced entry upstairs either. We all felt it. The manor itself was our adversary. Ancient walls that bled whispers, corridors that swapped out nightmares when we weren't looking. Marquez addressed the group. "Listen up. No solo moves. We pair up, we check our logs, we secure every door. We stay in radio contact at all times, and if anyone sees anything unusual, you call it in immediately." Her tone brooked no argument. We nodded. I stepped away, pulled my jacket tight, and looked back at the staircase leading down. Yesterday, that descent had nearly broken me. Today, I'd have to go back. Inspect cells 1 and 2, secure evidence, find out how someone could slip in and out without triggering alarms. All I knew was that once you crossed that threshold, logic bent and memory faltered. But we had a job to do. I took a breath of the cold morning air, letting it clear my head. My mind lingered on that child's handprint, the etched warning. The doll head returned to its place. Nothing about Caldwell Manor made sense, except that it was watching us, shaping the events to its own dark design. Marquez approached with a fresh cup of coffee and a firm nod. "Ready?" she asked. I met her gaze and inclined my head. "As ready as I'll ever be." I stepped toward the stairwell, down the banister I had reinforced, toward the cells I had once fled. Behind me, the teams fell into formation. The dawn was breaking, but it did nothing to lighten the manor's oppressive aura. Every step I took carried me deeper into its heart, where the echoes of the past and the terrors of the present blurred. and though I pressed forward, I felt it. A quiet, bone-deep certainty that when I closed my eyes tonight, I would still see that small handprint smudged on the frosted glass, the carved words glowing in the flicker of my flashlight, and a child's whisper echoing in my ear. Stay.